We are now recording.
Cool. Welcome everyone. This will be our final of the regular budget meetings for the city of Beaverton. I'd like to open the meeting first. And Susan, if you would please let me know if there's any general public input from our non-panelists, from our residents or interested parties.
Yes, I do have an individual named Maggie who has raised her hand, and I will go ahead and allow Maggie to address the committee.
Thank you. Mr. O'Clair, is there a time limit? Or are we?
It's 3 minutes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Maggie. Please, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that I'm disappointed, but not surprised by the nearly $1 million increase to the police budget, which is something that many of us in the community have spoken against very strongly for the past year. And it's disappointing because this is a continuing trend. Year after year, police is the largest percentage of the general fund and is approved for budget increases every cycle, while other budgets are reduced. And I'm particularly unhappy with the proposal to add a support specialist 3 position when the responsibilities and scope of that position are not defined to the public. We want to see a decrease in the number of armed police on our streets and a significant investment into alternative responses, such as the mental health response team. For the amount of money being proposed to add this position, I sincerely hope that the support specialist 3 will serve in some capacity as a component of the mental health response team and or bring awareness to that program, of which the public at this point is largely unaware of. All of that being said, I think that this proposed budget also just underscores a need for more community involvement in the budgeting process. And I would ask all of you to keep that in mind for the next budget season. Thanks.
If there is other attendees that would like to address the budget committee, please use the raise hand feature. I have a Pedro. Okay, go ahead. You are allowed to speak now.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Budget Committee. I don't have really anything planned to say anything pre-written, but yeah, ditto everything Maggie said. The police budget, getting a $1 million increase in the middle of this global health pandemic is hella disappointing and mostly irritating. It's not like Beaverton is in some sort of unique position where there is crime shooting through the roof and that we face some sort of extra grand threat here that the police would need another $1 million when school budgets get underfunded, housing and other projects get underfunded, and we're lacking in so many other essential services here in the city and in the county as well. We still have a ton of problems within the police department with over-policing of our people of color communities. The murderer from the Portland Police Department, who is now training here in the Beaverton department, that we haven't heard any statement on since there was a big push against that over a year ago. Yeah, it's mostly irritating. It sucks to see that there's no backbone from people at the county and people here at the city about these issues. We have had no school in session. Well, school is kind of in session now, but the 13 school resource officers get over $2 million a year, and y'all haven't done anything about that. You've ignored your Human Rights Advisory Committee. Laura Mitchell, with your camera off, you couldn't even sign an anti-racist policy in December without having a meltdown. The police, whatever her name is, the woman, the chair of the police department, had a whole meltdown when somebody accurately referred to the police as the Nazis in Hitler's Germany. The police were the Nazis in that time. The police are state repression against Black and Brown communities. The police ultimately don't do anything but protect you people in power and the white majority in this area and the racist people here in Oregon, the racist history here in Oregon. I just wish we would write a different story for our city and change the moral document that is our budget and change it and actually invest into things that would provide essential services. The cops don't provide any services. The cops only put people into this pipeline of incarceration and economic desperation with the fines and fees and penalties, and then overall just sense of community fear. So I wish y'all would do something about it. I wish y'all would listen to your Human Rights Advisory Council. I wish you didn't push the ball down onto the school board elections to say something about school resource officers in schools. Like I hated seeing the cops in my schools, and I hate knowing that students here are having to live, Black and brown students are having to live with cops in their schools. So please get rid of the school police officers, fuck the police, reduce the police budget, and fund essential services.
That's 3 minutes, thank you.
Thank you, Pedro. Susan, are there other comments?
And Amy Johnson.
Yep.
Go ahead, Amy.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I just want to echo what the previous callers have said, which is that we need to be reducing the amount of money that we're spending on policing. I noticed that this budget is increasing the amount that we're spending on policing, especially considering all of the public commentary that the council received during last year. I think that the changes there should be changes in the budget this year, and they're not being reflected from what we're seeing. And of course, school resource officers need to be out of schools. The Human Rights Advisory Committee told us that, and I'm not sure why it's still even a conversation. And then other than that, the things that we're seeing, if you might be like, I don't know, watching the news and hearing there's surges in crime and thinking, oh, well, that's a reason why we need police. I'd just like you to reflect a little bit further on that. It's not actually linked to defunding of any police departments, because police departments have not been defunded. More money has been going to them. And beyond that, the problem is that people don't have what they need. So we need to be funding is things that people need. Housing, like making sure that people coming out of this pandemic are going to be able to keep their housing when the moratoriums end, when the utilities are going to start shut-offs in August. We need to be making sure that people can pay that back. We need to be making sure that people have what they need, not funding police, which disproportionately cause harm in our community, especially to people of color. And if you think that, we aren't the place where the police murders have happened, it's just a matter of time. And there have been police murders in Beaverton, just not high profile national ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Susan, what other comments do we have? Or other participants?
Yes, I have a Brian Decker.
Okay. Brian, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for recognizing me. I'll be real brief. I just have a question for the committee. In reviewing the city manager's message regarding the new budget and the appendix thereto, looking at some of the requested funds that ended up getting reduced in over the course of this process before this proposed budget document was published. It looks like it looks like there was a significant request for funding for affordable housing programs under Cdd Development Division, and something like $1.6 million of that was reduced. Those seem like great ideas, affordable housing investment, and so my question is just, can the committee explain why that was sort of deprioritized compared to some of the things that were preserved in this proposed budget? Thanks.
Mr. Claire, is there an answer? Do we just recognize another comment? How does that work?
I could give some background on the information.
Thank you.
it was a big challenge to take those items out of the budget. They're great opportunities for doing affordable housing projects. As the Budget Committee and the Council knows, during the COVID-19, general fund reductions in revenues over the 3-year period is about $4.5 million. And we just couldn't afford to fund those at this particular point in time until our revenue stream kind of improves. And we do see that happening sometime in the future, and there could be an opportunity to use some of our new American Rescue Plan Act funding to maybe do some backfill on some of those activities. But that's going to be up to the City Council to decide how to expend those funds in the future. So I kind of view the reductions as a temporary issue to be brought back forward later for consideration by the City Council as the specific needs for these projects come forward. These were more like developmental projects of things that we think are coming down the pike. And the thought was we could take them out of the budget as a requested amount. And then as they come forward in actual fruition to the City Council, the City Council can make then determinations of how to fund the affordable housing requests.
Thank you, Mr. O'Clair. Do not see any more comments or questions from the audience. So Patrick, I'll turn the floor over to you. I believe you wanted to go over amendments.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. I know that I sent a lot of materials out in the last hour to everybody, and it's kind of daunting, but I would like to share a couple of items that are new to us. The first one is, I think, and this is amendment packet number 1. We had talked about receiving an additional $10,000 in community development block grant funding. So that's appropriating the revenue coming in and also putting it into what we call an account for uncommitted grant funds. We don't have a spending plan for this, but it's available to be spent in the future as items come forward that qualify for block grant expenditures. And then the last one at the bottom of this document is I mentioned to the committee last week, last Monday, that we did receive a reduction in what we thought we would receive in the Federal American Rescue Plan Act funding from $17.5 million down to $16.8. So that's a reduction of about $326,000 per year. So this is a formal recognition that we're going to receive $326,000 less next fiscal year, and it'll reduce the contingency of that Federal American Rescue Plan Act. But also there's a note that when we recompile the budget for being adopted, we will also go into the estimated column for this year and also reduce the current year's estimate of the funding for ARPA by an additional $326,000. So that was one item that I wanted to review with the council. The next one will be, I'm kind of going out of order, but Councilor Fagan suggested that in amendment packet number 1, that we reduce the start date of the program specialist that's going to be dedicated for the City Council's staff support from being recommended in the budget as proposed from August 1st to then start later in the year to January 1st of 2022. And so that's the change of reducing the salary and the fringe benefits for that position. And then there was a fourth amendment that was proposed by member Galindez, and that is to recognize that we had a request in the budget for funding of electrical charging vehicle stations, and based upon Mr. Galindez's request that he would like to bring forward a proposed amendment to fund the make-ready infrastructure for facilities at the Beaverton building and the new public safety building to make the areas ready for EV charging stations. And so this is a appropriation of general fund contingency and transferring it to the capital development fund, and then funding construction of the facilities for EV charging stations at the Beaverton building and the public safety building. With that, Mr. Chair, I think that is all that I have for updates of the city counts of amendments. I did want to mention that there were other documents of responses to questions, and we can, if the council has, or the budget committee has any questions on those responses, we can discuss those. There are a couple that are being still worked on. One is a request from Councilor Fagan to kind of give a history of how we got to our general fund contingency level this year, being at, you know, about 6% of the 11% that we needed. I'm currently working on that. I might be able to share that later on after the formal public hearing is open for formal public comments from the public before we go into deliberations of the budget. I think I might have at least a snapshot of that. And then it's going to take a little bit longer for me to determine how we're going to rebuild that contingency. I do have some ideas, but trying to figure out what that was today was a little bit too short of a time frame for me to get my head around that. And so that'll be something that I'll be bringing back forward to probably the city council on how we'll rebuild those contingencies. And then we do owe Councilor Hassan a great request that she had about taking a look at departmental budgets over time and a line graph and their FTEs for all the different, what we call department disciplines within the city. And so staff is currently working on that request. With that, Mr. Chair, I think that's the end of my opening comments. So we could go to the next budget review, which would be community development.
I think we have a Councilor Hassan has requested the floor.
Just a really quick question. I'm looking at the memo that you sent, and there's some, it's not complete. And I just don't know if this is the updated memo to the answers to the questions. Like Public Works is blank. So I just wanted to make sure that that was still being worked.
That's still be working on from Public Works. And I think there's another one, the police department.
Thank you.
And then members of that Mary also had a question.
I have a quick question as a new member of the budget committee for Patrick. I looked at the police budget and it is $1 million more, but it looks like most of that really is cost of living and benefits. Doesn't look like there's really any new positions or 0.10 FTE or so, but no new. Is that correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, Mr. Sassmer, you are correct in reading that. It's really the wage and fringe benefits driven costs for comparing this budget, current year budget to next year's budget is for the cost of living. There's basically three groups within the police department. It's mainly the Beaverton Police Association, which covers all of the sworn officers of sergeant and below. And then also the management side of it, which would be the lieutenants and above. And then there's about 4 or 5, what we call SEIU, which is our Service Employees International Union, has 4 or 5 members of their group within the police department. And so you have 3 different groups or 3 different COLAs and 3 different fringe benefits. But yes, you are correct that most of the increase from current year to next year is basically the cost of living. And I just want to mention that was a good point, that the support specialist 3 that was brought up in one of the public comments, it's not a new position. It was adding basically 10% of time to that. It's currently what we call a 0.8 FTE. So they're an 80% of a full-time FTE. The police department would like to have that position go to a 90%. So it's an additional just 10% increase in the cost of that position.
Thank you, Mr. O'Clair. So looks like we are up for community development. Is that Ms. Tweet?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Tweety, sorry about that. You're up. Sure.
Good evening, Chair Duggar, Budget Committee members, Mayor and Council. My name is Cheryl Tweedy and I am the Community Development Director for Beaverton. Tonight I'm here with my management team. So if you ask me any really, really difficult questions that I can't answer, we'll pull one of them in to make sure that you get a complete answer to your question. For the board members who are new this year, I wanted to let you know that community development is the development review permitting department, as well as providing services in long-range planning, transportation planning, economic development, urban renewal, affordable housing, and administration. So we're a department that has a pretty broad array of responsibilities. So tonight I am going to try to touch on a little bit of those activities by each division so you get a good flavor of what we've accomplished this past year, as well as what we hope to be working on next year once the new budget is approved. This past year has obviously been a pretty incredible time for all of us, but I'm here to tell you that CDD has been very busy. And in fact, most of our business lines were even busier than pre-COVID. I'll explain more of that later. Our fundamental goal in serving the community is to ensure that we have good customer service, that we're always implementing adopted plans and community vision, and that we're working towards making our city a more welcoming and equitable place. Next. We listen actively when council talks about priorities. And this year, we believe that our responsibilities to respond to council priorities fall into these 5 broad categories: housing, community support relations, infrastructure, visioning, and planning. Our proposed budget did hit most of these topics, but not everything has been included in the recommended budget. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Next. This year, we adopted a new CDD strategic plan. Our mission is to plan, facilitate, and develop a vibrant, prosperous, equitable, and safe community. And our 5 strategic priorities are, in the colored circle, diversity and equity, to be vibrant and inclusive, to plan for future community growth, innovation and entrepreneurship, and modernization. Next. Tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about our work of the current fiscal year, what's included in next year's recommended budget, as well as talk about some potential budget amendments that could be funded by ARPA in the future. Next. Accomplishments for this fiscal year. Well, first of all, let me tell you, if you're a little bit hungry right now, you're going to be even hungrier by the time we finish this presentation. There's lots of good pictures of delicious food from Beaverton businesses. Next slide. About a year ago, the department, like many other departments in the city, made some significant pivots in how we did our work, what our priorities were, what the needs of the community were, and how we were going to react to that to get us through the hardest months of the pandemic. We worked differently, but we still worked efficiently. We're all used to seeing these big visuals with lots of little boxes of people's faces on them. But I think most amazingly is after we adapted to this new technology, we found it to be a pretty efficient way of getting our work done. And we really didn't miss a beat, except in a few areas where that personal one-on-one touch is really necessary. This past year, we've had some dips in workflow, and we have reacted by relocating staff from site development, transportation, and building into other departments to help with work of other departments. It was a good way of using our staff resources as well as redeploying them to other areas of need in the department. Our building division staff were particularly creative. They started doing virtual inspections in occupied residential buildings. We'd never done that before. Technology had been there. This was the time we tried it, and it was actually quite effective and wonderful. We're currently doing inspections on a container food cart bar that's being constructed in the Netherlands. It's going to be shipped to the United States in the near future for a new food cart pod in the Old Town area. And lastly, we very quickly shifted our economic development and our affordable housing programs to recognize the needs were different, they were immediate, and we needed to be nimble and act quickly. Next. Here's a summary of the variety of COVID-19 programs and activities that we've conducted in this past year. Council's pretty familiar with most of them, but I like to call them for your attention. The Dining Commons at First and Watson was constructed last summer in order to create an outdoor dining space to support our restaurants when they weren't allowed to have indoor dining. It helped them stay open, it helped their employees continue to have jobs, and it really became a pretty wonderful community amenity. Open air business, Beaverton is where we took sidewalk and parking lot spaces and on-street parking spaces and converted them into outdoor dining and restaurant usage. People loved it. And in fact, we've done surveys of the community as well as the local businesses in these areas and find that most people want us to continue. So in the coming months, we'll be coming back to council to talk to them about how we might do that. Our economic development team is really quite heroic. They ran 7 rounds of small business assistant grants, deploying about $4.3 million to about 500 small businesses in our community. Each of those 7 rounds was a little bit different. We targeted to the needs that were most critical at that point in time. And I have to say, it really was an all hands on deck exercise with CDD and finance and legal and all the divisions in our department pitched in to make it happen. The ECDEV team also provided a wide variety of technical assistance and grants to Beaverton night market vendors to really help them through these difficult times. On the residential side, we provided rent assistance to low-income renter households in our community. Last April, we set up about $1 million worth of programming, working with Community Action Organization of Washington County. And also we worked with 3 other culturally specific organizations to ensure that the dollars were deployed in a way that everyone in our community who needed them had the resources to get to them. Recently, we've been awarded another $670,000 from CDBG, our federal program, and we are in the process of deploying those resources also to low-income renter households in Beaverton using the same conduit of Community Action Organization. As you can see, we're spending a tremendous amount of money on rental assistance that we hadn't been in past years. Quickly want to call to your attention the fact that on June 30th, the governor's eviction moratorium expires. We are quite concerned about what this is going to mean for hundreds, if not thousands, of renter households in Beaverton, and hope to be talking and working more closely with council on how we can support those people as they transition back into working and can stay in their homes. Next. Let's talk about some of the good highlights of the year. Affordable housing has been a big agenda for the community for a long time. Tonight, I want to showcase 4 of the projects that are in the pipeline, as we say. And the really wonderful thing about our housing delivery is the fact that these affordable units are really widely dispersed throughout our community. Cedar Grove is up at North Beaverton at Cornell and Murray. It opened last fall. It's a beautiful new building for 44 new families. Bridge Development and Wishcamper Development are proposed for South Cooper Mountain, so in our expansion area to our community. They're both in the pre-development phases at this point in time, and they're both being funded by the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. Wishcamper through city share, Bridge through Washington County share of that funding, which is a really exciting partnership for us. And I'm happy to report that last evening, Bridge Development received approvals from the Planning Commission, so they are marching forward. Next. The Marianne Affordable Housing Project was Beaverton's first project to be funded with the Metro Affordable Housing Bond proceeds. And we've got some bragging rights because this was also the very first project in the entire metro area to break ground and start construction. So we're really excited to see this project opening probably end of this year. Thank you. Other major development activity in the downtown includes the Patricia Research Center for the Arts building construction and our Beaverton Central District parking garage. The RESER, as we're now calling it, is about 75% complete and should be done by the end of the year. We've had schedule and budget issues due to COVID. We're working through them and looking forward to our partnership with the Beaverton Arts Foundation to open this beautiful facility in the spring of 2022. Let me just add that this is the first major arts and culture building to be built in the Portland metro area in the last 30 years. I think that's quite a statement about Beaverton and our goals, our aspirations, and the growing role that we are going to be playing on the west side as well as in the Portland metro area. The district parking garage is nearly complete. This shot shows some of the lovely artwork. This piece is called The Commons. We're having some additional construction work to the garage before we open it, but should be doing so this fall. Right now, our energies are really focused on getting the ground floor leased up. So when the resort opens, there are food and beverage establishments for people to enjoy when they go to the PRCA. Next. Downtown equity strategy. Several months ago, City Council and the Bureau Board said they wanted to ensure that we were deploying our resources and our projects and activities in a way that didn't cause undue harm in our downtown community. They tasked us with developing a strategy that would prevent and mitigate displacement of residences and businesses, create an inclusive downtown, update our decision-making processes to ensure that we had full and complete community engagement, and always work through a racial equity lens in crafting recommendations for board consideration. This work will be completed at the end of the next fiscal year. Next, some of the highlights from our land use planning and transportation planning teams are continued work on the housing options project. This is a piece of work we are mandated by state law to complete, and essentially it changes how we allow duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes to be allowed in our single family zones. It's a really important piece of work. The Cooper Mountain Community Plan is well underway. We've completed phase 1, which is an assessment of existing conditions, and we're working with Public Work Engineering on an infrastructure strategy for the area. This body of work should largely be completed by the end of next fiscal year and move forward to the Planning Commission and Council for adoption. Our downtown design project wrapped up last fall with the adoption of district development regulations. So really excited about that, which is a new, essentially streetscape project to connect Old Town and downtown with the Hall Watson Loop. And the planning process will put tremendous focus on the pedestrian realm, biking, and transit to really make it a much more inclusive, safe, and welcoming place for pedestrians. We've started work on the Milliken Way Extension. This is a street that essentially dead ends in the middle of Dameron Ford today, and it'll be extended eastward to Lombard Street. The reason this is significant is that Milliken is a collector street that runs essentially parallel with Canyon Road, and this will provide another significant route for people moving from East Beaverton to West Beaverton, other than being on Canyon Road. It'll also, I think, support additional redevelopment activity because in many ways, it's a main street. The transportation planning team, an army of one at this point, Jean Seneschal Biggs, has been very busy working with Metro and Washington County and other jurisdictions on a variety of planning studies, funding strategies, and participating on communities and partnerships. We're very grateful to the work of Metro leading the development of a regional transportation priority package. And we're very grateful that Beaverton has 2 projects that have been included in that package, including the Beaverton Downtown Loop project. Next slide. Development review services. This essentially means building, planning, and site development. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was quite a dip, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And in fact, our customers didn't know what was going to happen. Lenders were pulling the plug on projects. Developers were nervous, not knowing what was going to be happening in the marketplace. But through it all, we were able to transition to fully electronic services for plan review and meetings and pre-application conferences and communications. We've, as I mentioned earlier, managed some of our staffing levels to reflect the drop in development activity. I think this has been really one of the wonderful things about our city is that we support each other. And where there were other needs, we deployed our staff to help those other departments accomplish their work. The last thing I'll quickly mention on this slide is that we also transitioned our development code, which is our zoning code, from a PDF document online to a new platform of a digital development code. This is really exciting, especially for people that are kind of planning nerds, because you can go take a look at this, use the search function, and very, very easily get to the information that you need. Next. I'd like to highlight a few projects that have been completed in our community just to show that the world did continue. The photo on the left is Lowlich Farms in South Cooper Mountain. The land development has been completed and we're now issuing building permits out there. The photo on the right is the Verso apartment building at Southwest 2nd and Lombard. This is a 170 unit market rate apartment building. It's a wonderful new addition to our Old Town area. We've had 2 hotels open. We've had other multifamily open, and the Yakima High School has been rebuilt as well. Every month I track development activity for the department. I track both revenues and permit activity. Earlier in the fiscal year, things were quite slow, but that has changed quite a bit in the last several months. On the revenue side, site development is projected to end up in a little better position than our forecasted revenues, but both planning and building will be a bit down. Building will be about 40% down, in fact. Interesting story in the permit activity level, though. It tells a very different story about what's happening in our community. Planning and site development are essentially back to pre-pandemic levels, and building as well is actually up in the total number of building permits that have been issued. It tells us that there's been a change in the type of activity. Next. One of the major initiatives of the department this past year has been the implementation start for the electronic permitting system. We're very grateful to the council for their support of this project and commitment to the resources that have been necessary to make it real. We really kicked off in September, October of last year. We're about 8 months in, and the total project schedule is about 18 months. So we hope to go live in June of 2022. This permitting system will, for the first time, bring our planning, building, and site development functions into a single system so that all plan review, permitting issuance, tracking, and inspection services are all recorded within this system. And it'll provide much more service to our customers, and that they'll be able to pull up an app on their smartphone or go to the website on their computer and find out exactly what the status of their applications are. Next. In January of this year, the Code Compliance Division moved from the Police Department to CDD. We're really happy to have them. They came with 3 vacant positions, so job 1 was to get those positions filled, which we did in the first couple of months of the year. They now are full force and out there doing good work for our community to address concerns about sidewalk problems, rubbish, overgrown vegetation, discarded vehicles, all that sort of thing. And I'd like to note that this group is managed by Kimberly MacArthur, our building inspector official, and she has a real love and passion for this work in our community. Next. So let's talk a little bit about next year's budget. And a highlight work of about 4 divisions just to give you a flavor of the work that can be completed next year. We'll be continuing the Housing Options Project in Cooper Mountain Community Plan. Planning also is putting a lot of staff resource into the electronic permitting system. And we know that council has a lot of ideas for development code amendments that they would like to see. And we will work on them as our staffing resources allow. Next. Redevelopment and development. Affordable housing remains very high priority for this team, which is headed up by Cadence Petros. We hope to commit to our 3rd and 4th affordable housing projects to be funded by the Metro Affordable Housing Bond. We'll be working with the Community Services and Engagement team to identify severe weather shelter, new location. We will be completing the parking management plan and action plan and implementing it next year. Our storefront development tenant improvements, which are highly popular, will continue, as will our work through CDBG, property acquisition, and staffing for the Bureau activities in our community. Next slide. Economic development. They have just been incredible this past year. Mike Williams leads the group. He has a very strong team, and they are really anxious to get forward working on recovery efforts to help our small businesses in Beaverton. They have been very active in working closely with the development group, supporting Bureau projects such as helping with pre-leasing for Beaverton Central project, helping with leasing of the Beaverton garage and restaurant strategy work. This coming year, we'll be tweaking our restaurant strategy a little bit, and we'll be sharing that information with council as we really evolve into this next phase. We now have created a real destination in downtown Beaverton for food and beverage, and it's known pretty much throughout the entire metro region. So now we need to talk about how we keep it stable, how we keep it strong. Technology and innovation are a big part of their work, as is our relationship with Oregon Technology Business Center and continuation of the federally funded Brownfields program. Transportation planning. I've mentioned some of the projects they're going to continue to work on. I'll just also quickly mention that work to develop design and engineering plans for the Quiet Zone project will pick up this next fiscal year. And we will be engaged in a rethink about Canyon Road, working in partnership with ODOT and Metro. And council will be hearing much more about that in the near future. The transportation work program will be full, and when we're back fully staffed, we'll be able to get to work on some of these priorities that we know council is most anxious for us to be doing. Next. The next few slides, I'd like to talk to you about some items that were cut from the CDD proposed budget. Interim City Manager Kurt Wilson has suggested that I share some of these most critical cuts from CDD's perspective in hopes that they might be part of a future ARPA funding package. Next. I'm going to talk about 4 main areas. Let's start by talking about affordable housing. Next. Significant amount of funding was cut from the affordable housing budget this year. These top 5 line items show the resources that were requested and then ultimately what was included in the recommended budget. I feel that I would be remiss if I didn't share this information with you, the Budget Committee, because affordable housing has been such a high priority for such a long time. This list includes 2 homeownership programs, a new SDC backfill program, which is absolutely critical for the Bridge Housing Project in South Cooper Mountain. It includes the annual contingency amount that's set aside for our affordable housing reserve. It includes a reduction in the amount of buy-down funding for 2 projects, or buy-down funding for rental projects. Essentially what we do is we work with private developers and market rate projects, and we buy down for a period of time the rents to serve affordable households. So it's a way of creating more affordable housing in a building that otherwise wouldn't have it. Also, I'd like to mention the South Cooper Mountain Branch Library project. We requested some funding to do pre-development work. This has been a priority for council in terms of pursuit of federal earmarks and state funding. We know that there's some interest in the project. It'll be important for the city to have some resources available to support this project and to show our commitment as well. And I'd like to note that this project is not only a wonderful addition to Beaverton's, potentially addition to the Beaverton library system, and doing so with a purpose-built library, but it's also potentially really important anchor for the new Main Street Commercial Center that will be built in South Cooper Mountain. And lastly, COVID response. As I mentioned earlier, we know that the eviction moratorium is going to cause a lot of pain for many low-income households. We don't know exactly how many people are going to be impacted by that, but we do believe additional resources will be necessary. We're working closely with the mayor's office to track what's happening at the state and the county with their resources and programs, and there may be additional dollars available through them. Next.
Quick question on this slide before you go.
Yeah, I was going to recognize Councilor Sansusi.
Yeah, Ms. Tweedy, just a real quick question. Are any of the original asks that are listed on this page from either CDBG funding or Bureau funding, or were these all general fund requests?
These are all general fund requests.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Economic development, the numbers aren't as big here, but again, as we move into this recovery phase of our economy, we think that these are pretty critical items to include. The first is workforce training and assistance. In the last several years, this has not been a big program. It has not been needed by our business community. But we know now that as daycares begin to reopen, they're having significant difficulty rehiring their employees or attracting new staff members. So we believe there's an opportunity for this program to help with training for future daycare center workers. Under strategic opportunities, these dollars were requested to continue funding for the Chamber's Business Resource Center. Several chambers in Washington County created these technical assistance work teams to support very small businesses and particularly businesses owned by people of color. They did things like help small business owners understand what OSHA and Oregon Health Authority and CDC regulations actually meant, and it helped them navigate federal funding programs. And then lastly on this list, the COVID-19 Business Assistance Program. We have $200,000 of unused reimbursement dollars from the county. We had requested $200,000, much of it was cut. These resources are in ECDEV's budget, I think under line item 541. We would request that they be included in the budget so we can move forward with some of the additional grant assistance and technical assistance for small businesses in the community. Next, planning. This is a little bit of a different conversation. There are two components to it. As you've heard me say, we're really kind of struggling in the planning team right now to keep up with good customer service work for the current workload with current planning, long-range planning, as well as the electronic permitting system. When we presented the electronic permitting system to council many times over the course of a couple of years, we always anticipated that there would be some limited duration backfill to support planning staff participating in the development of this new permitting system. And because when COVID hit, we weren't sure what the future was, we didn't fill those positions. And it's become quite a management challenge. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of options for what we might backburner or not be able to do. So tonight, this package suggests two options to help with that workload issue. Number one, create one new associate planner, FTE. This could be a 2-year limited duration position. We think that this would be very helpful in keeping up with the current workload, as well as making sure our staff can fully participate and not impact the schedule and the budget of the electronic permitting system work. The other option would be to outsource some of the work and hire a consultant. We could do that. However, our SEIU contract only allows us to be able to outsource up to half an FTE. So we got that, that limitation there. So half an FTE of consultant services is $130,000, and a full-time FTE would be $80,000 for the year. The other thing I wanted to mention, because I know it has been a high priority for council for some time, is that we had proposed as part of the budget process that there be a new senior planner position dedicated to working on annexation strategy, working on a proactive long-term strategy to address our urban service boundary. I know council will want us to do work this coming year. If this position isn't ultimately funded, there will be really very little work that we can do. So my point of mentioning it tonight is to make sure that you understand kind of what's in the realm of possibility and what isn't. Next slide. I come to you with these requests humbly, and I want you to know that there were many other cuts to the department that we're not pursuing with you this evening. I tried to focus really on the highest priority items for the council and for the community. Next. We're looking forward to the new year and starting to get back to normal and continuing to do good work for our community. And with that, I'll say thank you, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Tweedy. Ms. Cole, I believe Member Galindez needs to be promoted to a panelist.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll go ahead and recognize Member Kamath.
Hi, Cheryl. I have a quick question. Thanks for your presentation.
You're welcome.
So this increase in raw material costs that we are seeing, do you think it is going to impact anticipated revenue from building projects in the next fiscal year?
That's an excellent question. That's one we talk about a fair amount. We're not quite sure how long the cost escalation is going to increase, but we know it's definitely impacting some projects in our community and actually all over the country. Building officials talk a lot about it. We're not really seeing an impact on the planning side, and we're not seeing much of an impact yet on site development. Building probably would be the group that's most impacted when building construction activity slows down.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Member Wong.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Cheryl, for the presentation, the great work you and your team are doing. My name is Hui, a new member of the board. I have a question with regards to your downtown equity strategy that highlights supporting an inclusive downtown. I'd like to just know if you can provide a little bit more context of what and how that meaningful engagement with communities of color would look like. Like some of what we heard earlier from the attendees today, I also see an opportunity here, and I wouldn't want this action item to just be a box that we check off. And I'd like to advocate with more focus on this portion of the action plan if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know what, I'm gonna start to respond. I'm gonna ask Cadence Petros, who is our project manager for this body of work, to join in. What I would say is over the past couple of years, we have done a lot of learning about how to have more engagement with everyone in our community. We know that our typical and standard practices don't always work, and we need to find ways to reach out to different groups within the community. And sometimes that means working through different cultural organizations to reach them. Cadence is our project manager for this effort, and I know she would love to chat with you for a few minutes about this body of work.
Don't worry, I won't take up a few minutes, but I'll just add that we have a fantastic consultant team that is assisting with this work. It's led by Vision Action Network, Bienestar Apano, Adelante Mujeres, Coalition of Communities of Color. And so we are currently working with them on a robust community engagement plan so that we can do better than we've done before and learn how we can do better for the next project going forward. So I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have about that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes, thank you, CDD and team, for your presentation. I want to just make two call outs, comments. On page 1250, if you all want to join me, you talked about program objectives. And I just want to tell you how excited I am to see objective number 1, which is around engagement and education. And I see Cheryl, I think she's looking for her binder.
Yeah.
Should I give you a minute?
Yeah.
It's page 1250. And the first objective was to engage and educate. And I want to take a moment and recognize how important that is, because what we are learning in our journey around everything is that that is something that is maybe missing with a lot of our communities. So to see it to be the objective and for it to see it to be the first objective, it made me happy. And I hope that we continue to do that. And then again, on page 1266, this is me making sure I read my budget packet. Objective 1, again, in your program objectives, providing high quality customer service for development and redevelopment activities. I am hopeful that as we continue to invest in how to best serve our residents and continue to let the city operate, that we focus on the highest level of service while also educating and engaging our communities as much as possible. So thanks for making sure that you pointed that out in this proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Member Gallo, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Tweedy, as always, great seeing you. Great set of slides. I love your presentations. They're awesome.
Thank you.
Simple question. Portland recently announced that they were beginning to crack down on, as they called it, cleaning up the homeless camps. Are we seeing any effect from that in Beaverton? I haven't seen any, but are you noticing, seeing, worried about some potential spillover to the city of Beaverton? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would have to say from a CDD lens, I don't know that we're seeing any spillover from Portland at this time. In certain areas of downtown, we have noticed more homeless people hanging out, and usually those are areas where the activity is quiet. There are some homeless people living around the round, for example, and in doorways of restaurants. So we've worked with the Homeowners Association and the Beaverton Bike Police to try to help get those people into services that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Caesar, did you have a question?
Yes, the chat is disabled, so I figured I'd just raise my hand. But again, thank you, Cheryl, for the presentation. But I just want to say that I'm also worried about the eviction moratorium ending. So, like, are you saying that if you don't get that extra funding, is there no extra like reserves to help people?
I wouldn't describe it quite that way. I wanted to raise the issue because with the eviction moratorium expiring, that is potentially leading us to uncertain territory. We are now in the process of deploying the additional block grant dollars that we received from the federal government. We have $670,000 to be deploying for rent assistance. We just don't know how big the need is, and we don't know if additional resources will be necessary to help support people in our community. The county has resources, the state has resources. They may in the future be adopting programs and dispersing them to local governments. It's just all too early in the planning process to know whether or not those resources would be made available. Clearly, we would want to take advantage of those programs before we used very precious and scarce general fund resources.
Okay. Well, thank you for voicing that, because the entire pandemic, that's one of the main things that I've been worried about. So yeah, just thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Member Gallo.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Cesar, thank you. I'm going to piggyback on your question, if I may. So, Ms. Tweedy, how would that work? I mean, do we have a process whereby the city, I guess I'm trying to understand what's the pecking order of requests, or the process whereby a resident could request to be supported by some of those $650,000. I mean, is it first you go here, then you go here, then you go here, then you go here? Can you briefly describe how that, let's call it pecking order or hierarchy of requesting would work? That hierarchy of requesting and fund disbursement, if I may.
Well, the process that we've used to date is that we have contracted with Community Action Organization of Washington County to be our primary organization to dispense these funds to households that meet the criteria. So I believe they have to be under 60% of median area income. They have to show that they're unable to pay their rent, and a couple of other criteria like that. But in addition to working with CAO, we've also contracted with the Muslim Education Trust, Apano, and one other organization, sorry, I'm blanking right now, to to disperse these same types of resources more to their own communities. So we think we've got our bases covered in trying to get the awareness of the program out into the community. And we'll be largely working with community action and these same organizations going forward.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So just to put a finer point on it, city staff are not reviewing applications for rent assistance funding. We're working directly with these nonprofit organizations that specialize in supporting people like this.
Thank you, Ms. Tweedy. Councillor Hassan.
Yeah, and actually to follow up on page 1243, it was Centro Cultural was the last organization.
Thank you.
Yeah, that question. There's some amount remaining. Do they have until, I'm assuming, this month? And community action seems to have the most. Has there been like an analysis on like who is maybe getting this to the right communities and who's the right people to get it to?
This information is a few months old, so more dollars have been deployed than is showing in this chart. I think it's under 100,000 now that is left to be deployed. I'm sorry, what was the other part of your question?
So I'm just looking at this and I'm like, if we come to this point again and there's funding, has there been some thought like on who we want to allocate funding to? And I'm not saying that one is, better than the other, but like, because I see amount remaining, I just wonder, like, are we kind of looking at where this money is going and then making sure that we're giving it to the right organizations?
Mm-hmm. We work closely with them. We obtain monthly status reports from the different organizations. So we do have some flexibility for future awards of funding to ensure that dollars are going to organizations that can deliver. And I will say, some of you may be aware that when we first contracted with Community Action, it took a little while for them to get organized and get these dollars out the door. But in fairness to them, this is a big chunk of money to come their direction and to amp up and to be able to deploy it. But we think they do a good job overall.
Okay. And then just one follow-up question. I know that there's a requirement to provide proof that you aren't able to pay. And I know that this falls more on the nonprofits, than us in general. But in my experience, a lot of communities don't necessarily know how to even show proof that they don't know how to pay. In your experience, does it seem like an easy process? And I realize maybe you wouldn't even know, but just kind of what your initial thoughts are, because I've seen some challenges for people, and I don't know if that's a common conversation.
Yeah, I do know a little bit, and then maybe Cadence Petros, who manages the affordable housing program, can jump in here. I know that previously Community Action did require proof of a 72-hour notice to eviction notice before they would fund. But because of the eviction moratorium, they had to change that criteria. So I believe it's a pretty straightforward process for people to apply for the funding. They have to indicate a reason, loss of jobs or loss of hours at their job, to explain why they're not able to make their rent payment or their utility payment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any more questions. I do have a couple myself. Try to make it quick. The Sidewalk grant program, can you give me an approximation on how many people get turned down? Like what's I saw that $44,000, I believe, was spent. How much, what's the need there?
Yeah.
I see a lot of bad sidewalks.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very popular program. We're basically out of money as of this week. I believe we've committed it all. So the total annual budget is about $50,000. It's a matching grant up to $1,500 per household. And if times were different, I might have been here tonight requesting some additional resources for that program. We're now fully staffed. So we know we're going to be working with more homeowners who have sidewalk issues, sidewalk repair problems, and there will be more interest in the program as we go forward.
Thank you. A quick comment on the open air program from Central Neighborhood. We love it. Great, fantastic. Great. One thing that's problematic, I think there, and I heard from a bunch of business owners that set up the initial program and just sort of feedback going forward. There was a bunch of different rulemaking bodies that were involved. I'll give you an example. I won't give the business name, but they set up a tent downtown per the city of Beaverton's rules. The fire department came and took it down, and then the county came later and then changed the rules again. And that's really difficult from a business perspective. So I think there might be, I'm looking at it as an opportunity. I know that we don't want to take, we can't take away their rulemaking ability, but we can coordinate. And I think that's an opportunity for us to publish one set of standards that kind of match. So that was my second comment. Last question, when we give out business grants, how are we assuring that there's an equity and justice in the distribution of those grants? How are we being transparent? Can you elaborate on that process? Thank you.
That's a really great question. I think I'm going to ask Mike Williams to give you more background on how communications go out, how we use social media, how we use different partner organizations to spread the word that those rounds of grant funding were available. And as I mentioned earlier, Beaverton is a naturally diverse business community, and what we found is that about 2/3 of those grants did go to businesses owned by people of color. Mike, thank you. Take it away.
Yeah, Cheryl, you got that right. And then about half of the grants went to women-owned businesses. It was interesting over the grant process. The first one went out really quickly. And as we went through it, we got better and better with our outreach. And our numbers, I think, reflected the diversity in the small businesses that we have in Beaverton. That's 66% number. So a lot of it had to do with working with partners on the ground, working with the Impact Beaverton and MISO and Adelante Mujeres and the various chambers. And working with them and their constituencies and their base and getting the word out. We also did other things like we mailed, we had mailers because not everybody's opening up their email or social media. So we tried direct mailers and we did pretty well with those. We did quite a bit of just door-to-door with the Impact Beaverton and the Business Recovery Center. They had an outreach specialist that was working door-to-door, especially in our Allen Boulevard market. So I think a lot of it had to do with the outreach and with the types of businesses that we very intentionally targeted, which were storefront businesses with a public-facing presence.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes.
The chat feature apparently is malfunctioning. Some people can access it and some people cannot. And I don't know why. I apologize. But I think member Jose Galendez might like to say something.
Yeah, Susan, I think it may have to do with being either a panelist or a member. I think you may have to, those that are reporting it's not working, can you check to see if they've been promoted to panelists? I think that was my problem.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, if in the interim before, as we figure that, as we navigate through, if anyone would like to speak, panelists, please either raise your hand or let me know somehow. I believe that's I don't see any more questions for you, Ms. Tweedy. Thank you so much. Mr. O'Clair, I think you're
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So after the last department is finished, we are now on to more of the scripted agenda, and that was emailed out to the committee and the chair. And it starts with after the last department presentation is finished, we have items number 1 and 2 to discuss. And then after item number 2, I'm gonna kind of ask Ms. Cole if she is ready to share some data that she has been working on Councilor Hassan's request for 5-year department by function expenditures and FTE counts. Granted, it's data that I haven't vetted myself because she's just was working on it today. And so there could be some changes as we refine it, but at least we have some raw data that we can share. I believe it's in a worksheet formula, And I don't know how quickly on the fly that we can convert that to like a line graph. But anyway, Mr. Chair, if you want to just continue with the scripted agenda, and you're at item number 1, where the chair formally conducts a public hearing on the FY 21-22 proposed budget for the city of Beaverton. You open the meeting for general public input.
Sure. Consider this meeting for the public hearing for the fiscal year 2021 proposed budget for the city of Beaverton open for public input. Are there any attendees? One person has had their hand raised for a while. I don't know if that person would like to speak, but are there any attendees, public attendees, that would like to provide public testimony?
It was Amy Johnson, and I will go ahead and allow her to unmute now.
Yeah, her hand has been raised for a while, so I don't know if, Amy, do you have a comment or a public testimony?
Yeah, I did have a question when I was looking over a budget summary document that I saw, which was talking about the different funding sources and how they were changing this year and different funding streams. And one thing I noticed was that the transient lodge taxes were not as available as expected because of the fact that people haven't been able to stay in hotels as much as they could have or traveled. And I do know that the Patricia, the Research Arts Center was approved, and that indebtedness was decided upon, I think, slightly after the COVID crisis began. So I'm just curious how the decision was made that we needed to take our money instead from the general fund to pay for the art center when we have all these other things that Cheryl Tweedy mentioned, which actually align with the council priorities, such as affordable housing, which were not going to be funded at the level that she was requesting. That's my main observation of what I've just listened to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Claire, did you have anything to add there?
Yes, I could add a couple of observations. One, as the Patricia Research Center for the Arts was coming on board, the city council made a conscious decision to create a new fund called the Transient Lodging Tax Fund, and then to use those funds purely for the future development of the construction of the Patricia Research for the Center Arts, because the city had committed up to $21 million worth of bonded debt to help with that construction. And the TLT fund would be used to fund that debt. And the rest, and then it would also be used to fund the continuing operations of the Patricia Research Center for the Arts. And so what the council decided to do, create a new fund, transfer the existing 2.5% of existing TLT taxes, along with the council enacted an additional 4% city TLT tax, specifically dedicated solely to the PRCA. So it really did not have a general fund impact for funding any of the things of the general fund. So I just want to make sure that that Amy understands that the TLT fund is used purely solely for the PRCA, and it was never meant to have the general take any revenues away from the general fund to fund that. And so if there's any other questions that might come up of this particular activity, I can answer those. And yes, we did issue the $21 million to bonds. We did know when we were issuing the bonds that we were starting to go into COVID-19 and there'd be reduced revenue. So we structured the bond such that the first 2 years was only interest-only payments, and principal and interest starts in fiscal year 22-23 when the TLT funding should be a little bit more stable.
Thank you, Mr. O'Clair. I do not see any more hands raised, so going once, going twice. This will close the public hearing on the proposed budget. I believe, Mr. O'Clair, if I'm reading this correctly, we now conduct a public hearing on the proposed uses of state revenue sharing funds.
That is correct.
So I will open that meeting for public input on the proposed uses of state revenue sharing funds. Do we have any public testimony on those particular funds? Not seeing any.
Yeah, I don't see any hands raised.
I will close that public hearing as well. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the proposed.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. So there are a couple of things that I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting that I'm able to share before we go into discussion. So I can start one and they give Ms. Cole maybe a little bit more opportunity to take a look at her worksheet and she can share that. But I'll go ahead and take over the meeting and share my screen. Again, this is a very conceptual view of one of the items that Councillor Fagan had asked about is one, how did we get to a reduction of about 6% of fund balance for the city's general fund? This is something that has occurred over a period of years. It started in 1920 when the pandemic first started. We are completely this year fully in the pandemic. Then we have pandemic issues going into this fiscal year 21-22. So the first part of the screen are what I call the revenue losses that we incurred in the general fund by year. So in fiscal year, our revenue losses consisted of planning fees, site development fees, and court fines and forfeitures of about 1.5 million. Continuing into 21-22, the only ones that we had that for this fiscal year are planning fees and court fines. Site development permit fees are coming in on target to what we had planned to receive this fiscal year. And going into fiscal year 21-22, again, planning fees and court fines are performing under performance of historical values. When we take a look at the combined revenue losses over the 3-year period, it's about $4.7 million. In addition to that, during the same 3-year period, we had additional type of expenditures that were kind of one-time or continuing or new expenditures. One is that we took funding out of the contingency fund of the general fund to help support the COVID-19 for our business and the residential communities. That was about $507,000. That was a council action of providing almost about $3 million worth of support, with $500,000 of it coming from the city and the other balance coming from Washington County through their portion of CARES Act funding that was designated to come to the city of Beaverton. In fiscal year 21-22, we had some increases in the mayor's office for staffing for employees coming on board. We have a new city manager expense that we had not had in the previous fiscal years. And then as the council recalls, our kind of statement to the COVID-19 was that we did not want any city staff positions to be reduced due to COVID-19 issues. The biggest issue that we had and the most immediate issue we had was in the building fund. And so we took staff that are paid out of the building fund and actually matrixed them to other general fund activities. And so we had building staff working in facilities, we had building staff working in records management, we had building staff working in code services. Sorry about that, that's services misspelled. The general fund has to repay that back to the building fund. So that was an additional expense that the general fund picked up kind of on behalf of the building fund to keep those employees employed with the city of Beaverton. And then in fiscal year 21-22, coming on to this year's budget, we have the mayor's office staffing support for a full year. We have the additional city council staff support. Now this is the amount for the full, almost the full fiscal year. There's an amendment to reduce that to be only starting in January 1st, but the budget as presented shows that it was funded for basically the whole year. And then we have again a city manager for the full year, the executive assistant to the city manager. And then sorry about this, but I did this really quick. I didn't spell check before I completed this, but as council and the budget committee members can recall, we did have a relatively large increase in our PERS cost for this new biennium starting July 1st. It's an additional 4.53% of payroll. So it's an additional almost 5% of payroll costs that we need to pay for our retirement system. It's something that we have no choice over. To help mitigate that, in the budget, we did propose using a portion of the PERS reserves that are designated for the general fund to help offset that. So that's why it shows a negative $665,000 to help offset the $1.5 million worth of PERS rate increases. So on expenditure increases, we have almost $3 million. When you add the two together over the 3-year period, it's a $5.6 million kind of hit to the general fund. Meaning if this had not have happened, we would not have incurred this additional expenses or had these reduced revenues. The fund balance shortfall that we have to our projection, where we should be at about 11% of expenditures, is about $4.2 million. And so when you take a look at the difference between the two, had COVID-19 not happened, had we not had these additional expenditures, we would be to the good by about almost 3.3 over the 11% target. So I hope that this helps satisfy some of the questions that Mr. Councilor Fagan had. It was very quickly done. I did it during my spare time today in preparation for this meeting, and working with Susan to figure out how to address Councilor Hassan's request for data, taking a look at a trend analysis. So with that, I'll stop sharing the screen and turn it back over to the chair for any questions.
Let's see. Looks like Member Gallo, you are up first.
Thank you, Chair Duggar. Patrick, before you, so on that, I wish you could bring that thing up again.
Oh, sure. Let me.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. So just to confirm, the funds for the city manager job function, which is now at 365, includes the projected cost from amendment package number 3. Is that correct?
No, it does not. Amendment packet number 3 is not considered in this analysis. Amendment packet number 3 will further add to the kind of the reduced contingency of the general fund, because that will be funded from the general fund's contingency, as will be shown in amendment packet number 3 if you were to take a look at how it's.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gallo. Councilor Fagan, you're up.
Yeah, Patrick, thanks for going over that. I know we've gone through some of it, but we did that early on in the budget process. And then after going through all of the budgeting, I wanted to come back to this. I think as budget committee members that have been on the budget committee for a while know that contingency is one of the things that I worry about a lot. The council has put in a contingency policy, which is where that 11% number comes from. And I know there were a lot of circumstances that caused the fund to decrease. My main thing I'm hoping over the next weeks or months to get to is to get Patrick's recommendation for how we build that fund back. It's not going to happen quickly. I think it's going to take a couple of years, but I think it's really important. Having that contingency there helps the city function and protects us when things like COVID come up or PERS jumps again. So we need those funds there. And I think we talked about it last year that the reason we have the contingency is for cases just like we're experiencing right now. So I'm glad it's there. I just want to make sure what we do going forward is work on a plan to rebuild it so that we get back up to that 11% level at this point in the budget. That's all I had to say. So thank you, Patrick. I appreciate the numbers.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Kameth.
Hi, Patrick. I have a quick question. So I think I noticed that planning fees and court fines have been consistently below anticipated, the anticipated numbers for the last 3 years. Is that right?
This year's estimates and next year's recommendation. So based upon a trend that we have, there's an expectation over past years that our levels of planning fees and citation revenues would be kind of even. And we have seen the drop. And the drop is basically really COVID-19 related due to three things. One, people were not driving as much. And so infractions were down. Two, that I don't believe the police were actively patrolling for that particular those particular fractions. And also to state that there were some infractions that by state law, the temporary state laws, they could not enforce, such as the vehicle registration, because DMV could not process registrations or renewals. And so you couldn't give they shouldn't give a ticket to a person for failing to get their vehicle relicensed if they could not physically get it done. And so I believe that that's even still continuing up all the way up until sometime, maybe even December 31st of 2021.
I thought I saw that, sorry. I thought I saw that these were impaired even prior to COVID. Is that correct? These revenue sources were below budget even prior to COVID?
No, they've been actually very stable revenue source, the planning fees and the citations. And then the third item that I thought of is that also during COVID-19, we just very coincidentally, we changed collection agency services for the municipal court. And the court felt it wouldn't be prudent to start to do an active turnover of citations that had gone unpaid to collections during the COVID-19 process. And so we haven't had that revenue coming either through collection agency services for people that have failed to pay their traffic fines.
So these drops are primarily related to COVID, and it's not really some sort of a permanent impairment of revenue.
I would say that is correct. The only thing that could be a continued impairments revenue would be what I call officer-initiated citations. You know, having the officers out there actually physically doing the citation enforcement might take a little bit while to ramp up as we get out of COVID-19. But the other revenue sources, such as the photo radar vans and our cameras on intersections for red light running and speed through green, they operate no matter what the issue, no matter what. And so they will continue to operate. The reason that we saw decreases in those revenues is the two things is one, people were not driving as much. And so the citation rate went down. And plus then turning over failure to pay citations to collection agency services.
Thanks, Patrick.
Director Tweedy.
Yeah, good evening. If I could jump in for just 1 minute on the planning fees discussion. I wanted to let the council and the budget committee know that in general, Beaverton is a really cheap date in terms of the fees that we charge for our land use applications. And we are currently undertaking a fee study. Jody Yates from Site Development, Kimberly MacArthur, Building Official, and Anna Slatinsky, our planning manager, are working together to look at what other jurisdictions in the Portland metro area charge. And we anticipate coming back to council this fall with a fee policy as well as a revised fee structure, which I believe will result in additional higher fees being charged for our land use work to really reflect the level of service that we provide. I can't give you a generalization of how far we are from other communities, but I know that particularly on the planning side, our fees are on the low end compared to most other jurisdictions in the metro area. So we'll make a proposal to council. Hopefully they'll adopt it, maybe effective January 1, and the revenue picture should look a little bit stronger going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Members at Mary, you're up.
Yeah, just a quick question. What type of risk analysis did you all do to get to that 11% contingency?
What we did, Mr. Satsmary, is we took a look of historically where, on a budgetary basis, we had been in contingency in relation to a proposed budget, and it hovered around the 11%. That's how we memorialized that. And why it's so low, because you might think 11% isn't that much. When we prepare the budget, and especially for the general fund, it has a very diverse revenue stream source. We're pretty conservative in our revenue estimates and preparing a budget. We don't want to overestimate revenues, because if you do that, then towards the end of the fiscal year, you're in trouble. So we are very conservative on the conservative side in estimating revenues. And the budget also assumes that 100% of what is budgeted is going to be spent. And we know that that is not true. Our risk analysis, our analysis really shows that it hovers around between about 93.7 to about 94.6% of the budget is expended. And the biggest majority of that for the general fund is in personal services. About 66% of all general fund costs is in personal services. And the budget assumes that all positions are funded 100% of the time. And that just, that over the course of the fiscal year, that just does not occur. So on a budgetary basis, it's 11%. On an actual basis, when we look at the actual results of the fiscal year, that's where it's at about 17% basis. And 17% is basically about 2 months worth of your operations of the fund in contingency. So that if something catastrophic happened, you would have about 2 months to kind of retool your operating model so that you can start living with more within your means if you had a catastrophic issue.
Thank you, Mr. O'Clair. Are there any other questions before we move forward?
And Mr. Duggar, I did get a text from Ms. Cole that she's ready to present some information about Councillor Hassan's request. It's very rough data. I haven't had a chance to analyze it, so we're all going to take a look at it as she's prepared it. So Susan, the floor is yours.
The floor is yours.
Okay, well, grain of salt, right? Okay, so I just quickly pasted some graphs into Word here, so they're not, extraordinarily beautiful. But the first one we're looking at here is expenditure and FTE growth over time from 2017 through 2022. And this is all expenditures combined, including capital. So you can see here that there's, what I like to look at is the steepness of the curve. So from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20, you can see the blue line here is quite steep. And that represents roughly a 49% growth between the 2 years. And that's largely because of our capital program. And you can also see here our FTEs. I haven't calculated that percent change, but it's, it's going up a clip, and then it jumps up and then plateaus a little bit here. And the scale is, just 1 year to Go ahead.
And Susan, just a quick question on the line for 2022.
Yeah.
Does that include contingencies?
Yes.
That are in the budget?
Yes. It's all categories combined.
Yeah. So because when you take a look at it in fiscal years 17 through 20, it's not going to include contingencies, but probably 21 and 22 do, because in our accounting bureau system, it doesn't show contingency as an expense.
That's a good point.
So
that's correct.
That's probably one reason why it's got a big jump. And so, that's one of the things, in doing a data request without having time to analyze it, you'll get this result. And so we would need to probably correct that to get a true, really expense to expense value from year to year.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. And then I divided it by the population to get a per capita. And so you can see that, our population is increasing, and the scale here, this is one thing I would want to review too, is the scale. It looks, you'll notice the population is on the left here, and then the per capita is on the right. And it looks like they're fairly even, but that's because of the scale. So our population is increasing roughly 1% or so a year. But our expense per capita, is going up a little bit more than that. And as Patrick said, it includes capital and contingency. So I would want to back that out. And probably go back another year or two to get a better trend.
Susan Galler, if I may, and Patrick, so when you say it includes capital, this includes water, correct?
Yes, it includes all of our capital infrastructure, all the, Yep.
This, I love it. I love it. I'm not sure it paints an inadequate picture of, let's call it, normalization. So I would like you to consider, again, the big big and unique, if you will, right, expenses, which would be the investment in capital in the water and water systems and water systems capacity additions, and maybe even the research center, right? Research is a huge one as well. So I don't know. I love it. I'm afraid someone might look at this and paint a distorted picture of how we're spending profitably, spending a lot. And the answer is it may need to be normalized. That's the whole. I love it. Thank you for the data.
Yes, absolutely. For example, the Community Development Department is the department where we include those large capital construction projects. And so I have not yet backed that out. So yeah, I would want to focus on city operations compared to population. And these graphs at this point, this is a first step. So the next step would be massaging that data to focus just on operations.
And it really is two beautiful pictures, right? One is the let's call it operational efficiency, or lack thereof, as the data may suggest. And the other one is where it paints a picture of how we're choosing to continually invest to robusticize the city, right? And that would be these graphs all in. So thank you, great data, love it.
Susan, go ahead, Mr. Oakler.
In fact, I could see actually on that first graph is to have two lines. One would be your normal operations, which is basically city operations, and then to have a second line for, in fact, even two lines, one for what I call infrastructure development, which is water, sewer, storm, and street, and then another one for civic development, which is going to be not only the Patricia Research Center, which is 21, which is, we're doing the full construction. That's a $40 million building.
Yeah.
$45 million public safety building that was just built in that same time frame.
Okay. So 50 million right there. I mean, it's 50 million right there.
Right.
Councilor Sansucci, I believe you.
Yeah, just really quickly, I'll echo what Gallo and Mr. O'Clair said. This is data that requires more than one graph and a little bit of narrative associated with each graph as to what each one represents. I mean, it's really fascinating to see these graphs, trending graphs over time, very valuable. But we need a lot of them, not just one or two.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Hassan. Oh.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify, I think what I had asked for was kind of a by department. So to understand like how the departments have grown over time. And I don't know if that's something that's prepared or not.
I have the raw data, just not in a line graph at this point.
And Susan, if you wanted to show that worksheet so they can see the detail that goes behind it.
I can do that.
And it was really, I give Susan a lot of credit because we just did this this morning, and with all of our other duties and things like getting ready for the meeting, can you do this? Well, I think I can. So we do have all the data by what we call our function, which is by our department. And I think we lost your graph there, Susan.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Script.
Yeah, give me just a moment. I'm having a technical issue. Hold on. I need Jeopardy music. Okay, hold on. Okay, here we go. There we go. Are you seeing the spreadsheet now?
Yeah, and so we do have the data. We have city council, city administration, human resources, finance, and then we have community development, capital development, engineering. And what happens is that in probably, let's see, trying to take a look at things. Yeah, community development, that's very unrepresentative. You take a look at fiscal year 17, 18, 11, and 13, then it goes to 27, 54, and 61. And then 50, that includes civic projects that we need to back out and create a capital projects for civics.
And the changes in back and forth, right? We've moved people back and forth and reclassified, particularly in Cheryl's world, that need to be, again, gazintas and the gazadas.
So Susan, one thing that I usually like to do is like to put a proof that the total for 142, 548, 255 for fiscal year 2017 agrees to our general ledger for the full year, so we're not missing anything. So those are kind of things that we need to vet. And then what we can do is then we could probably take this worksheet and embed charts within it by the department number. Have to break it out so that you can take a look at that.
Councilor Hassan, I believe you had a follow-up.
Yeah, and I just, if you could keep this up, like, you know, as a newer counselor trying to grapple with city requests and what folks are asking for, this picture for me helps me understand like what departments have seen growth, what departments aren't seeing growth, like what does that look like? And so, you know, I see public works like 91 people, right, in 2017, 95 in 2021, right? And I look at CDD, right? And so I just, this I think helps me, and I don't know how other folks feel. It just gives me a better picture, right? I see police 171, and then we see 187. So that's, you know, so we're seeing growth in some departments, we're not seeing growth in some departments. It helps paint a better picture, but then also helps us start talking about like, where do we want to see growth in departments and where we don't want to see growth in departments. So I'd love when, you know, just for us to have this in general and for us to maybe get this in the future as we continue to have these conversations, because this feels really, really informative and important for me to be able to understand, you know, how we want to move forward, understanding the history. Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move forward? Seeing none, Mr. O'Clair, did you have any more information to share?
Sure, Duggar, sorry, I need their hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Member Caesar, sorry about that. I didn't see that.
No, and it's more of a comment. I just want to say, Susan, thank you for doing that. It looks great. So just.
Oh, thank you.
Any other questions before we move forward or comments? And Mr. O'Clair, what were you saying?
So, Mr. Chair, I think we can go to the scripted agenda. Would it be helpful for me to share that on screen so people know where we are in the process?
Sure, Doug, I think you're still on mute.
I am on mute, thank you. I'm really good at this, you guys. Oh boy. I will now entertain a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 20 to 21 budget as submitted and to set the ad valorem tax rate for operations at 4.2260 per thousand of assessed valuation, and to set the property tax levy for general obligation debt at $2,074,171.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by, was that Member Gallo?
Yes, sir.
And seconded by Mayor Beatty to approve the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget and property taxes as submitted. I'll now call for discussion. Let's see, I recognize that there are 5 known sets of amendments. Do I need to do the amendment part first now, Patrick?
Yeah, so we do each amendment individually. So we have a vote on each amendment as they are brought forward and considered. So we're on the area of getting a motion to approve amendment packet number 1.
I see. So I will entertain a motion to approve the amendments in amendment package 1 as submitted by the finance director.
So moved.
We have a second.
Second.
It's been moved by Member Gallo and seconded by Councilor Sansucci to approve the amendment package 1 as submitted by finance director. We will now open discussion. Is there any discussion? Looks like Councilor Sansucci.
No, that was a prior hand
Was
raised.
it a prior one? Got it. What about you, Councilor San? Was that current or prior? Sorry, I'm looking at 2 screens.
That's okay. I just, at what point are we talking about this overall budget? Because I have some things I'd like to say, but I'm not sure at what point I'm supposed to say those things.
We could probably do that after we do all the amendments, because now then you're going to be voting on the main motion as amended.
Okay.
So that would be the point to talk about the general, any suggested amendments you would like to bring forward, or just general discussion.
Okay, I'll wait.
Are there any other discussion for Amendment 1? Call for a vote on Amendment Package 1 as presented by the Finance Director. How do we, what's
and
the
Mr. Chair, we'll have to do that by roll.
Is it by roll? Okay.
By roll call.
Okay. Susan, do you want to do the roll?
I'll let Susan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you ready?
Yep.
Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
I'll be right back.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan.
Yes.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
Yes.
Member Huang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
Member Zatzmary.
Member Zatzmary is a non-voting member.
Yeah,
Oh.
I don't vote.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay. Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at the right amendment. Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. The motion is carried. I will now entertain a motion to approve the amendments in Amendment Package 2 as submitted by the Finance Director.
So
I'll second that.
And who made the motion? The main motion there?
Fagan.
Thank you.
Councillor Fagan. It's been moved by Councillor Fagan and seconded by Councillor Sansusi to approve the amendments in Amendment Package 2 as submitted by the Mayor to the proposed fiscal year 20 to 21 budget. We'll call for discussion.
Just a quick point that Amendment Packet 2 came from the Finance Department on behalf of Bureau.
That is correct. That's wrong in the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so it wasn't my fault this time.
That is correct.
I believe I do not see any discussion. Susan, if you would like to conduct the roll.
Sure. Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan.
Yes.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
Yes.
Member Huang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
And Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
The motion is carried. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the amendments in Amendment Package 3 as submitted by Mayor Beatty.
I move it.
Second.
It's been moved by, was that Mayor Beatty? And seconded, who, I didn't catch who seconded.
Councillor Tivnan.
Councillor Tivnan. Moved by Mayor Beatty and seconded by Councillor Tivnan to approve the amendments in Amendment Package 3 as submitted by Mayor Beatty to the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget. What discussion do we have?
Gallo has discussion.
I do not see your name. Member Gallo, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm opposed to this amendment and this addition in headcount. For the simple reason that I'm not convinced that going from essentially one leader in the city government, which was the mayor, the city has become so complex and so convoluted in 1 year or 2 years that we would need to go from one individual running the city with an incredibly competent staff to support him or her to now having 3 people in the same role. I think this is a bridge too far at this point in terms of our adding resources to this function or duty. And I am opposed to this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Gallo. Councillor Sansusi.
Yeah, I'm sure the mayor will have a lot more to say on this, but I'm going to say briefly. First of all, there is very little chance that this position will be filled until towards the end of the year, because the new city manager has to come on board and then consider role definition and a recruitment process for the position. Secondly, I think we on the council, as we've gone through this transition period, have seen that there is plenty of need and opportunity for additional high-level management in the city, and that a single city manager would be stretched to take care of that in a city our size and a city of our complexity. Assistant city manager is a very common position in cities all across the country our size. I'll stop there and let the mayor have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Beatty.
Yeah, I want to just, point out a couple of things. When our city operated, I think the best in the last 12 years, we had the strong mayor and a chief administrative officer. So it was actually two positions. When there started to be not the best management is when the chief administrative officer left. And I have no ability per the charter to do any staff management. So I handle all elected stuff, but really, we have to lean into this. The voters asked for it, and we need to staff appropriately for it. We know from our interim city manager, who has decades of experience, this is a needed position to make sure that things are accomplished. And while I didn't vote to move the city charter forward the way it was written, I inherited it when I was elected this year, and I want it to operate at the best capacity it can. And for the best capacity, we have to staff it appropriately. So I hear you, Gallo. This wasn't where I thought I would be last year running for office, but this is where we are. And I think to give our staff the best support, this is the best way to do it.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Mitchell.
Thank you so much. I will also oppose this amendment, and it is for the same reasons as Gallo stated. I wasn't part of the council when we had a chief city administrator, and I saw the city run well. And I think that it was unfortunate we couldn't articulate the expenses to this government change, because I think that would have really influenced the voters. And I really feel like if we're truly going to be sensitive to city expenses and keeping our city an affordable place to buy a home and maintain livability, we have to stop growing our government every chance we get. And those are the reasons that I will definitely be opposing this.
Thank you, Councilor. Member Kamath.
Yes, this is just a sort of informational question, just for my information. So why wasn't this put in the original budget, and why did this have to come up as an amendment if we knew that we needed administrative officer even before going into this? So it's just, maybe I don't know the details of this budgeting process, but it's just for my understanding. Couldn't we have put this ahead of time?
It's a good question. I'd like to hear what maybe Kurt, if Kurt wants to add some. Mr. Wilson, Dr. Wilson. You're on mute.
Sorry, I forgot I have two mutes. So yes, I'd be happy to. So with respect to the question of why was it not included in the original budget, it's really for the same reasons that many of the other things weren't included. Simply recognizing that it's a difficult budget year in many ways. And the other sort of more overriding consideration is that in some ways, it's really more of a policy decision. So with the interim the proposals from the interim manager, I was somewhat reluctant to wade into what would ultimately be a policy decision regarding how we do that. That said, I'm happy to speak to the merits of it if you wish.
Are there any other questions or discussions before we move forward with a vote? Councillor Hassan.
Yeah, so I think I'll just ask this out there. I am new to this process like some of you. And so I see these amendments and I'm like trying to get caught up really quickly. is it safe to say that when we heard from other departments, the way that the budget lives exist in terms of additional things that people were asking for, it's likely that we will not be entertaining those unless we have supplemental or budget amendments? Yes or no? There's no budget amendment. This is what we're going to be most likely voting on or talking about. Anybody?
May I?
Sure, Councilor. Yeah.
There have been many times over my time here with the Budget Committee where we have had discussions about amendments where amendments didn't pass. We've had ones where amendments were passed by divided votes. And there have been instances, including some recent ones, where we were told that certain amendments weren't appropriate for the Budget Committee to consider and they needed to be council decisions. This is one of those that's a tweener. It can be done by the Budget Committee, it can be done by the council. If it isn't done by the Budget Committee this evening, then this subject will come up at a city council meeting in the not too distant future, and we'll have that conversation as a policy level decision to be made by the council. It would be efficient to get it done tonight, but it doesn't have to be done tonight. That said, I'm still going to support it.
Thank you. So upon reflection and thought, I was very excited to hear about the work that HR wanted us to see and do in equity. And while I know that's a totally different discussion, I want to support the assistant city manager role, and I will be voting yes. And I am doing that with the hope that we can hopefully take some of that equity work and also equally distribute it amongst our senior leaders so it becomes everyone's responsibility.
Thank you, Councilors Hassan and Sansusi. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Susan, would you like to take roll, please?
Sure. Councilor Fagan.
Yes.
Councilor Hassan.
Yes.
Councilor Mitchell.
No.
Councilor Sansusi.
Couldn't hear you.
Sorry, yes.
Oh, yes. Okay. Councilor Tivnan.
Yes.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
No.
Member Huang.
Can I abstain on this vote? Is that a possibility?
Yes.
I'd like to abstain, please. Thank you.
Member Kamath.
I would like to abstain too.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. So we are on package 4. I will now entertain a motion to approve the amendments and amendment package 4 as submitted by Member Galindez. Member Gallo. I have a motion.
Well, I would hope Member Gallo would move his own motion, but I'll move it for him. I'll move that we pass amendment packet number 4.
We have a second.
I mute it. I move it.
So it's been moved by Councilor Sansusi and seconded by Councilor Mitchell. Did I hear that correctly? To approve it.
Guys, sorry.
Yes. Too late. To approve the amendments and amendment package 4 as submitted by Member Gallo to the proposed fiscal 21 and 22 budget. What discussion do we have? Looks like Councilor Sansusi kicks us off.
Yeah, just to actually comment, I'm pleased that Member Gallo did this and that I didn't have to do a similar amendment. But I do want to say that I'm a little bit surprised to see in the narrative above this the comment that it's for charging equipment at the Beaverton building and the public safety building. Clearly, we need charging equipment at the Public Works building as well. I don't recall seeing that in the Public Works budget, and I'm curious if that is there. And I'm also curious if it isn't there, if this amendment, because it's just in the narrative, is flexible enough that it could be spent on that in addition to or instead of one of the other buildings, depending on how it goes.
And Mr. Chair, this is Patrick. I can address that.
Sure.
Yes, in discussing the going forward with the sustainability team, these were the two facilities they really wanted to get done first, and they felt it would be okay to hold off on doing the operations building till the next following fiscal year. So I do have the cost of that. I think it would be to do the public works building. It would be $232,285 to do that particular building. So that would be in addition to the $300,000 that's being proposed.
Well, I'll put that on my list of future conversations to have in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Mr. Auclair. Councillor Fagan.
Well, I love technology. I think we're moving to electric cars, but I don't think this is the year to be doing this. When we're looking at our contingency to be where it's at, and we're saying no to a lot of really good things that are high priorities, I'm okay waiting off on this one until next year. I think it's important to do, but I just would rather keep the contingency as high as it is. And as you all know, that's one of my concerns. So I'll be in opposition to this one.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Beatty.
This is a tough one for me. I drive an electric car, and I'd really like the Move Ready infrastructure plan. But I think given the way that the budget committee is falling this year, I'd like us to wait a year, and I'd like us to put together a total package and go after a federal earmark for it. So for no other reason than I want to find other money for this, I'll be voting no, but not because I don't believe we need to do this. This is a top priority for me to fix and address.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Tivnon.
I agree with all of that. And I also see the value in having the Climate Action Task Force in place to help us think through holistically how we're installing this type of infrastructure throughout the city. This seems, it's extremely important, but I'd like to see as part of a larger framework of how we're going to go about doing this work, and also get additional funds to help fund it all.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Gallo.
Thank you for all. The only thing I want to say is, to me, this feels like one of those where, personally, I would not want. Let's not let best get in the way of better, and this one I think fits that to a T. Let's not let best, which would be all those other analyses and funding opportunity or support for this. That would be best. Let's not let better get in the way of doing something.
Thank you, Member Gallo. Any more discussion? Seeing none. Ms. Cole, could you call the roll?
Councillor Fagan.
No.
Councillor Hassan.
No.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnon.
No.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
No.
Member Galindez. Gallo, are you there? Is he muted?
I believe you're on
muted again. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Member Huang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Molinado.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
No.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Let's see. We will now entertain a motion to approve the amendments and amendment package 5 as submitted by Councillor Fagan.
So moved.
So moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
Has been moved by Councillor Fagan and seconded by Councillor Sansusi to approve the amendments and amendment package 4 as submitted by Councillor Fagan to the proposed 20 to 21 fiscal year budget. What discussion do we have? I believe Councillor Fagan was up first.
Yeah, I just brought this one forward. It's kind of a, I think as we talked about at the last meeting, this position is a placeholder. It's not going to be funded immediately. we have a lot of discussion to have about what the role and the responsibilities of this position will be. And I think a lot of that discussion will come after we have a 7th counselor and after we have a full-time city manager. So I just wanted to make the budget more realistic or more in line with what reality would be if this position is created.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tivnon.
Thank you. I support moving it forward too, not because I necessarily support it. I think it's a conversation worth having. I'm still getting my head wrapped around how I would make use out of the role as a counselor, and but that's a conversation that I'm interested in having and hearing from the other counselors on what their needs are to do this job to the best of our abilities, and that's something I'd like our unknown yet future counselor to be able to weigh in on as well. But most importantly, I don't want it to come as a surprise to anyone in our community that we're thinking about this. So getting it out there for people to know that we're discussing it is important to me. So I'll be supporting it though, looking forward to a robust conversation around the role.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hassan.
I won't repeat what Councillor Tivnon and Fagan said. I agree. I just want to offer some context. When we voted in this new charter, we created a separation between the city manager and the elected officials. And a lot of the elected officials, or all of the elected officials, are part-time. And so managing the workload of what's been happening in this change of government has been really challenging for many of us. And so while I don't know what the need for our for counselors looks like in terms of support, I do believe that we will need something, but I also would like to have a full council, a city manager who's been with us long enough to help us figure out what that actually is so that we are able to support our residents in our city.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Beatty.
Yeah, I advocated to add this position when we were doing the charter because as a city councilor that worked in a full-time executive job, I felt like I didn't have the support I needed to be really good at both. And I often had to choose between being good at my work and being good at a city councilor. I added it to the budget in the council budget this year on behalf of council because I still believe and now that I work in the building, having support to do your job as a part-time elected official. And I hear quite often from our council about how hard it is to take calls during the day, how hard it is to do their work. And this position supports them. So I understand wanting to reduce it and talk about it through January. But this position specifically is for the council, and having done that job for 6 years, I fully support, and the community should know it takes a lot of work to be an elected official here, and having one person support 6 people is not a huge jump and leap.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. I am not going to support this position, and it's for the same reason as the assistant city manager. I don't expect the taxpayers to write us a check for any amount for a maybe. If there is a need, then we can come back and ask for it, identify exactly why there's a need. I just want to make sure that the intentions behind the growth of government are really, really justified. And we're not even sure if we need this. So if we do need it, I would ask for it. But at this time, even though I support all of my counselors and I see where they're coming from, I cannot understand how anybody would help me with this council position for a lot of different reasons. But again, I appreciate my counselors, my fellow counselors' position on it, but I will not be supporting it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fagan.
Councillor Mitchell, just a point of clarification. The position's already in the budget, and what the amendment does is lowers the dollar amount for the position. It's in the budget with an August 1 start date, and the amendment puts it back to a January 1, 2022 start date. So it saves us about $40,000 in the budget and puts it, I think, more realistically where it would land after we have time to discuss it.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion?
Yeah, just one quick comment. There is also the necessity for council to decide to do a hire. and then the necessity for the council to go through the process of doing a hire if the decision is to go forward with a hire. So there are many, many steps between now and when there is an actual person helping the council. So there are plenty more opportunities for future discussion.
Thank you, Councillor Sansucci. Is there any other discussion before we move forward to a vote? Seeing none, Susan, would you please call roll?
Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell.
No.
Councillor Sansucci.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnon.
Yes.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
Yes.
Member Huang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
The motion is carried. Are there other discussions or amendments?
And Mr. Chair, this is Patrick. Just for the record, I want to just acknowledge that all 5 amendment packages did pass. So as we go forward, that'll be the main motion as amended by packages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. And now we're at the point, if there's any other just general discussion of the budget or any other amendments that any of the other members would like to bring forward.
Councillor Hassan.
I think Councillor Sansucci's first.
You're welcome to go ahead. I'll follow you.
I'm sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. So this has been a really interesting process. You know, I want to start off and thank everyone who has put so much time and effort. This must be a labor of love for all of you. I cannot imagine putting together binders and pages and printing and putting all of us together. And so I thank you for that. I will say though that when I imagine what I got excited about when I came to City Council and got to sit here, it was this idea that I was carrying voices of the communities that voted for me and that were excited about, you know, government and what we see in our future. And this process for me has felt really status quo. And I respect that we are in a strange form of government. We're in a lot of transition. But despite that, I've felt a little disappointed because I feel like we're really missing community voice. Like I don't see the community voice in this process. In this last year, we have seen the impacts of the pandemic on our communities of color. I looked at the Washington County data. We in Washington County, Latino residents have a twice as likely chance to have had COVID in this last year. In addition, in the Beaverton School District, we know that our Latino students are dropping out and not succeeding in high school or in the school system at all. In addition to that, we saw, you know, in front of us, a day, 2 days ago, George Floyd, you know, die at the hands of a system that we all participate in, whether we choose to or not. And so I've seen this like desire and excitement for community engagement and commitment to racial equity and this stuff that I'm excited about and that I feel excited to see. And I feel like that has been missing in this budget process. And I acknowledge that, again, we're in all of this change, but in the future, I really would like to see some more community-centered voices. I'd like us to think about community listening sessions where we hear from our community. I'd like for us to think about what our boards and commissions would like to see from us so that we're listening to our community. There are things like participatory budgeting, which is a really big concept right now, which is around letting the people and the residents make choices around what happens with their money. I've heard people talk about the desire for a multicultural center so that there is a place for placemaking. I don't think these things will go away. And while I do not have any formal amendments or supplements, because I am new to this process, I want us to really think about in the future how we do this so that we can continue to have community voice in this. I want to thank our budget committee community members. This is a big piece of work. If I was you, I'd probably be really intimidated by a lot of this. I know that I have been, although this is my first go, but I've had a 5-month opportunity. And so I encourage all of us listening, thinking, imagining the future. What does it look like to continue to center the voices of our communities as we make decisions in our budget? I don't think that we got that this time. I'd like for us to do that in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan. Councillor Sansusi.
Yeah, I have a few comments of my own that I want to make, but I want to respond a little bit to what Councillor Hassan has just said. And thank you for saying what you've said, because I think what you've identified is that there are some additional significant transitions that we have to address in the transition from our old form of government to our new form of government. In my previous 12 budgets, you know, the process has largely been that the mayor and the staff developed a budget and the council got to see it 10 days before the budget committee meeting. And maybe there were some conversations about some of the elements that might end up in the budget prior to that. But it wasn't even until like 5 or 6 years into my time on the council that we even had sort of a pre-discussion about the budget. So we're moving in the right direction, but I think the advent of a 7th councilor and of a long-term city manager are going to give us the opportunity to rethink some of this process and rethink how we develop priorities earlier in the process so that they can feed in more explicitly into budget development so that we can get those public voices in. So do not let go of that thought, and I won't either, and I don't think any of us are going to. We want a continued evolution of the budget process as we go forward, and exactly how it's going to play out is work for the future. So let me mention the things that I wanted to bring up at this point. They're really reviewing some things that were said during the previous nights. We have 2 pages of items from Mr. Wilson that were taken out of the budget during internal budget review that we need to have some additional conversations about between tonight and when the council adopts the budget, if we learn enough about the ARPA funding to know how to deploy that ARPA funding to address some of those takeouts. We have requests for FTEs that were removed from the budget for internal budget review purposes. And we'll want to consider those requests, including the ones Ms. Tweedy mentioned this evening, and in the context either of ARPA funding or other things. I made specific mention of a couple of CIP projects that we need to have further discussions with our public works team about, particularly in the transportation arena, and also CIP projects projected for years 22 and on that we just saw for the very first time last week and had never seen them before. And so we need to have some conversations about those. So I see that while this budget is fine, it is, as Councilor Hassan said, it's really a status quo budget, and it's got a couple of mysteries in there that we need to keep talking about. So I'm going to be supportive of the budget, but I'm also going to insist that we have some further conversations over the next month or two so that we can resolve some of these questions that have come up along the way. And with that, I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sansusi. Member Caesar, I believe you're up next.
Hi, first of all, I just want to say thank you to Councillor Hassan and Councillor Sansusi, because they voiced what I felt too, that I mean, I feel like the budget was well written, but if it seems kind of stale or cold with regards to lack of community engagement. So I feel reassured knowing that 2 councillors have voiced that. The reason I raised my hand is that I think it's really imperative that we give the money that Director Tweedy asked for. And I don't know what needs to be done, but I just think that out of all the things that I've heard during this budget process, Director Tweedy's requests are what I really care about. And I think that we should give her department that money.
Thank you, Member Caesar. Member Gallo, you're up.
I see my turn. Councillor Sansusi was very eloquent.
Thank you, Member Gallo.
As well. So thank you, Mark, as always.
Councillor Tivnon, you're up.
Thank you. First, I want to say thank you to Councillor Hassan for what you've said. Coming into this new, I've been very quiet this time around. I don't imagine I will be in future years, but it's an intimidating process. And I feel right alongside the other new folks that have joined the budget committee this year in it's kind of hard to find your voice when you're not sure if the question you're asking is a dumb question or not, or silly, or you should have already known that. So I just want to acknowledge that for the other folks that are new to this. One thing that I have observed, and this predates this budget by a long shot, many, many months, basically since my onboarding happened in September of last year, is I've heard anecdotally from folks that work at the city that there's a disconnect between when the city council sets their goals and priorities and when the staff are actually fashioning and starting their budgeting processes and thinking through how they're going to fund things and what they're prioritizing. And that there's a level of frustration that by the time the council convenes in the very, very early part of the year in January or February, I'm not sure always when it lands, it's already like, it's not baked, but it's in the oven at that point. And it's very, very hard to undo a lot of the hard work that's gone into crafting and formulating the budget. So with all of that being said as background, I would really urge that the council set priorities and goals in fall. And I know that there's got to be some logic behind why it happens in the early part of the year, but I think we need to push back against that and really work to have it be in the fall. And I know that this year is kind of tricky because we have a special election happening in September. I was going to suggest we do it in September. That's a little tricky this year. But I do think that it has value in doing that because one, it really helps our staff at the city in the job that they're doing. And two, it gets us closer to what Councilor Hassan is talking about. And, you know, we can inject what we're hearing from the community and also the things that we are very passionate about, the reasons why we ran. We can make sure that those are really front and center and provide hopefully some voice to folks that want to see different lenses applied to the work that we're doing in new ways. So I'll end there, but thank you for listening to all that.
Thank you. Mayor Beatty.
Thank you, John. You know, when I thought about running for mayor 18 months ago and made my announcement, one of the things I was looking forward to most, weirdly, was being able to have a lot more influence in the budget. But as it may, and now government and times change, I feel like in my 7th budget, I still don't have the influence I'd like to have. And just like everyone else on the budget committee, I'm reacting to a document we've not had in our hands for a very long time. I will say, though, that I do think Mr. Wilson spent considerable amount of time thinking about what potentially could be funded by ARPA, which is why I think we saw some of the cuts we were seeing. Having been the lead politician, so to speak, dealing in ARPA for the last 2 months, I feel like all I do is talk about ARPA. I want to caution us to not just start dumping money in every single hole that we think the money can plug, because we only get this once. It's a once in a generational infusion of cash, and we really need to see what our partner agencies are doing. If the state does what they're supposed to do on housing, we're able to spend our money differently. To Cesar's appeal from Councilor Tweedy, if they do that piece, we don't have to backfill the affordable housing. If our county does what we think counties should do and what they're chartered to do, work on vaccine clinics, getting out, homeless shelters, then we don't have to apply our money that way. I, like everyone else, want to, and the things that were cut mean the most and dear to me: affordable housing, equity, some of these things, working on dorky downtown code to make sure that it looks like the way we want it to look like, and it doesn't have infill everywhere, and it looks and feels like a neighborhood. I, like you, this is a status quo budget. And like Councilor Tivnon said, I think we need to move to every other year goals. The reason we did it the way we did it, because it's election cycles and when people are sworn in. And so that's the way we've done it. We can eliminate a lot of that by going to every 2 years. That means we have to have higher goals. We have to step up to the 50,000-foot view, which this council and the mayor included are not always great at. We like to get in the minutia and details, but by being kind of micromanaging of things, it doesn't let staff unleash the power of their subject matter expertise. So I don't want us to do goal setting until a 7th member joins us. That would just be silly and would not respect that councilor's position with us. We'll have a new city manager here for a few months. And my hope would be that going forward, the budget truly does reflect what elected officials are saying. And we could button this up in 4 hours and we don't have to argue about every little detail. So thank you, Mr. Wilson, for stepping in a crazy time, putting this budget together quickly, thinking about all the things that were in it. And I would have a million ads and a million amendments if I could do them. I try to focus my energy in 1 or 2 areas this year. And I think next year we'll see a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Members at Mary.
Yeah, just a request, I guess, for next year from Susan and Patrick. It might be useful to have one sheet of paper with all of the bonds that you have out there, when they come due, what the percentage is, and so on and so forth. Because if you can bifurcate the bond funding from your other revenue sources, you can take a look more closely at things like contingency, for example. The contingency budgets and the risk analysis I've seen over time, 11% on everything is pretty high. I don't think it's low, but that could be incorrect because with the bond stuff in there, it kind of muddies the water. So just a sheet outlining that, I think, would simplify a lot of things in terms of FTEs and contingencies, contingency reserves even, and so on. But overall, I thought the budget was great.
Thank you. Members at Mary, Councillor Fagan.
Councillor Hassan, you were speaking to my heart there. I think this is my 9th budget cycle. And I think in my first budget meeting, at this point, I was saying this process is bad and we need to fix it. So we've worked hard every year to make it a little bit better and a little bit better. And with this change of government, I'm really hopeful that we'll be able to make some significant change in the budget process going forward. Because to Councillor St. Susie's point, there was a time where we would not hear ahead of time what was going on in the budget, and you get a 1,200-page document dropped in front of you, and you have 6 days to the first meeting. We've come a long way. We still have a long way to go. One of my favorite changes to the budget was the addition of community priorities that is in all of the narratives, talking about how it meets the vision goals, how it addresses some of the DEI work. Having that in this document, I think, is really important, but there's more we can do. And I look forward to working with all of you on the Budget Committee and on Council as we refine this process to better serve our community. And to echo to echo Mayor Beatty, Mr. Wilson, thank you so much for coming in and helping us keep everything going in this year where it was a lot of change. And Patrick and your team, appreciate your work as always. You make this challenging task a lot easier. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hassan, did you have a quick response?
Yeah, I'll just, I want to say, like, if we're thinking of council retreat, because I have council, forgive me, I'm going to address council. Like, are we looking at October? Are we looking at November? Like, do we want to, like, maybe, I don't know, decide soon? And then, like, do we want to have some sort of way that we reach out to our own communities, right? Because we don't want to just go in and do priorities without some feedback from people that we talk to. So I'm just putting the plug in. I'm sure the mayor maybe wants to, she just came off mute, maybe wants to respond. Like, what do those dates look like so that we can plan and that we can plan accordingly and feel more excited in the future?
I would say it's safe to assume sometime in late October. We don't want to roll into the holiday season. It's harder to get people going and what we're doing. So I think, I'm thinking late October. Maybe we'll have a Halloween get together and it'll be spooky, scary talking about Beaverton priorities.
Thank you, Mayor. Dr. Wilson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I just want to take a minute to thank Patrick and his team and the citywide executive and finance team that have worked on this. I've done more than my share of budgets, but I've never seen anyone who just enjoys it as much as him. And most finance directors are very stressed this time of year, but Patrick is in his happy place. So that speaks very well to the process. So in response to some of the comments, yes, you're absolutely right. This is absolutely a status quo budget for the reasons I sort of outlined in the document, but you are correct. It's exactly that. And sort of hearkening back to the retreat, when we sort of talked about some of that timing of things, you're also absolutely right about the input, the conversation, some of those sorts of things. And as many of you mentioned, that's really going to be much more practical as a function of timing. So the earlier, the better. Basically, as early as you're able to get it done. Summer obviously doesn't work. And once you get into the holiday season, it's much more difficult. But the earlier you're able to get that done, the easier it is to transition those before you get into that process. Because, for the folks, Patrick's team who've been putting this stuff together, as you can see, it's a pretty robust process that goes for quite a while. So the earlier in the process, the better. But I'd also reiterate that it's not just about getting that done for the budget, but those priorities are really sort of the targets for the staff. You've got a very capable staff. And as you make this transition, I think you're going to be in a very, very good place with your permanent manager to really be able to move those things forward. And that person's going to be very interested in sort of helping you achieve those targets. So the earlier you're able to sort of identify what those targets are, the sooner you're going to be able to see that even incorporated into your agenda bills and sort of everything else that you do. So it's not just a once a year process, but for everything you do year round, I think it's going to work very well. And that early phase is really the best time to have that public piece. So whether it's traditional public engagement, whether it's participatory budgeting, wherever you fall for doing all that stuff, the earlier the better for getting that stuff done. And with that, I'd just like to thank you for the process.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Member Huang.
Yeah, I'll make this quick. As a first-time member on the board, I just want to say thank you to everyone in this committee for this really invaluable experience and the incredible work that y'all do. It's comforting to know that a few of the counselors share some of the same concerns that I have. So I came into this budgeting process not really knowing what to expect or the influence that I have as a member. And now I'm walking away learning so much about the ins and outs of the various processes, and having a vote in these decisions just shows and reminds me of the importance of the decisions that you all make. So all that to say, thank you. I'm hopeful for the future of Beaverton, and I'm happy to be part of the city under all of your leadership. So thank you for this experience. You're my time.
Thank you. Member Gallo.
Oh boy. I hope I don't lose it. This is number 15 for me. 1-5, 3 mayors. Never see it. Never gets old, but this is my last one. So it's been amazing. When Mayor Drake was interviewing me, and one of the questions he posed was, "Why do you want to be on the budget committee?" Right? And I said, "Well, I'm Hispanic. You don't have any Hispanics on the budget committee. In fact, you don't have any minorities at all on the budget committee." And I look at where we are now, right? Not only in the budget committee, but also in council and in the staffing of the organization. And John, great job, man. You did awesome. And you guys are going to be okay. Thank you.
Can I take a picture?
I gotta just reply briefly, Gallo. You are always interesting to work with. You are always interesting to listen to, and you always have very insightful and thoughtful comments on our budget, even when we don't agree about it. And everybody when you're around treats each other with respect, and that is a wonderful thing. So thank you for that. And we'll miss you, but you know how things are in Beaverton. We just keep moving forward.
And I wouldn't put it past you if you got gallograms. Gallograms, even people that used to work for me get gallograms. It's like, what were you doing? What were you thinking about? So you might get gallograms. Thanks.
Well, and I just want to say when Mr. Gallo emailed me earlier this week, letting me know it was his last budget cycle, I wanted him to know, I think as elected officials, we're always trying to strike the balance between bringing in new voices and having people here that have seen the budget through 3 mayors, multiple elections, economic downturns, global pandemics, and he's really helped us be able to blend those 2 voices together. And now some of our oldest serving, not in age, but maybe in some of your cases, budget committee members are elected officials. And so we need to think long and hard about how we're training people to read the budget, because I learned something from you every year, Mr. Gallo, looking at it differently. And we don't always agree, but that is the best part of government, and it's the best part of participation, is everyone brings a different voice and a different perspective and a different background into the work we do. So you're going to be missed on this budget committee, and I look forward to nominating your replacement. And so I'll be looking to you for some insight on who that should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Lacey, and more than Mayor Lacey, as I've known you for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple things before we move forward. First of all, actually 3 things. Gallo, you rock. You're going to be missed. We're really going to miss your leadership, buddy. On the budget process, I wanted to bring up, and this was for the counselors. We actually talked about this before we entered official while you guys were in your executive session, but we actually talked about the need for a different budget process. And I think of it in 2 ways. Number one, we've got to engage the community more. I had 5 people engage with me this year because they know I'm on the budget committee. 4 of them have asked for a different process that is not reactive. They see the budget, when it's published online, and then they want to have input. They want to have an input before that happens and help craft the priorities. But I think there's a second need that and I almost submitted an amendment for just a token amount of money to do, but I heard from a couple of the new members this year, and we usually have new counselors. A lot of people don't know how this process works. I admit, my first year, this is my 3rd. I did not know what an amendment was, how to do it. I just knew I wanted to serve, and I think we can continue with status quo, and people will figure out this is a smart group of people, or we can train them in the beginning and offer some sort of, I don't know if it's a retreat or something, just to show people this is when we get presentations, this is when we do amendments, this is the question and process, something along those lines. I'm not an expert. I just know that I know we have a lot of smart people in our community that want to serve, and we just got to help them get there. The second point, and I'll be honest, when I first saw the capital improvement budget, Councilor Sansushi, you saved me the other day, because I was almost a no on this budget just on that alone. But I'm just going to trust our elected officials that you'll continue to craft that. You all have immense credibility with me, and I, from a community perspective, I wasn't particularly. I know we're in a tight budget, and I know this is a different year, but I'm going to trust each of you to work harder on that. I was disappointed in what we saw so far. And then finally, all the city staff, all the people that contributed to this, I'm continually amazed. The counselors, your leadership, especially the citizens that work. It is hard to miss dinner with your family. It is hard to read 1,400 pages of budget. It's hard to know all of this. I'm continually impressed by my fellow residents, by your thoughtful responses, by the new people. You bring passion that reignites those of us that have been here for a while. So thank you for that. And that's all I have. So is there any other discussion before we move forward? Seeing none, I believe, Patrick, if I get this correct, I will call for a vote on the main motion as amended packages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Is that correct where I'm at?
Yes, there's a script if you could read that, because
Okay.
it does talk about sending the budget to the City Council for a public hearing.
Okay. Call for a vote on the main motion as amended by amendment packages 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that the budget be forwarded to the City Council for a public hearing on June 15th, 2021 to discuss and adopt the proposed 2021 fiscal year budget as amended.
So moved.
There's no need to move. It's already been moved on the floor. So this is just calling the roll call vote. And then again, for the members of the committee, this is the complete budget as amended.
Susan, would you please call roll?
Councilor Fagan. You're,
Yes.
yes, okay. Councilor Hassan.
Yes.
Councilor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councilor Tivnon.
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilor Tivnon.
Yes.
Okay, Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
Yes.
Member Huang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
And Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
The main motion is carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the November 16th, 2020 Budget Committee meeting.
I will move those minutes.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councilor Sansusi and seconded by Member Gallo to approve the minutes from the November 16th, 2020 Budget Committee meeting. Is there any discussion?
To clarify, if you were not at the meeting, you can abstain.
Correct.
Thank you.
Does not appear there's discussion. Susan, would you do us the honor, please?
Councilor Fagan.
Yes.
Councilor Hassan.
Abstain.
Councilor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councilor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councilor Tivnon.
Abstain.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galindez.
Yes.
Member Huang.
Same.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I could just have Member Maldonado changes to an abstain since he was not here at the meeting to approve it.
Oh. Sorry, abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Clear and Mr. Maldonado. The motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, it's about 8:52. Supplemental budget, I hope it will be not too long, but I think that we might need a little of a bio break, being that we've been out here at it for almost 3 hours. So if we might be able to go to reconvene at least 9 o'clock.
Sounds good. Let's take a 8-minute bio break. We'll be back here at 9. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is it going to let us know that, or is it recording now?
It is, yes.
Okay. So let's see. Chair calls upon Patrick O'Clair, Finance Director, to discuss Supplemental Budget S21-2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk this process that we're going to go over with the new members of the committee. So every year, the budget is a living document. We need to make changes to it as the year proceeds. And some of the changes that are enacted by city staff have to go through the supplemental budget process. And that's what this portion of the meeting is. We're actually going to bring forward to you through the supplemental budget process the request that the city would like to enact it as formal changes to the adopted budget for this year, and then have some discussion on that, and then hopefully approve that as amended. And once that process is done, then the chair of the budget committee will cease his gavel, turn the gavel over to the mayor, and the mayor will then open a special council meeting to adopt the supplemental budget that the budget committee has just approved. And then the mayor will also entertain a motion to set the public hearing date for adopting next year's budget on the June 15th. Then after the mayor is done with that portion of the meeting, she'll turn it back over to the chair of the budget committee, and Chair Duggar will see if there's any other general comments from the budget committee on the budget, and then we'll adjourn. Okay. So we have the scripted agenda that's going to walk us through that. So we're at the point where I do have one proposed amendment that I would like to review with the budget committee. And let me make sure that I have it up with me. let me share my screen with that. And stop share. Trying to get the, sorry about that. I'm trying to get the right screen to share. Just do that. Okay, hopefully this will be what everybody is seeing right now. This is a proposed amendment to the supplemental budget. And every year we have a process of reviewing our appropriations to see if people have cashed out the personal time off or vacation during the fiscal year. And what that does is it hits the current year budget. And some of the funds that have relatively few FTEs in it need to have a supplementary budget adjustment to provide funding for those cash outs of what we call personal time off. And so we have a $5,000 request to fund activities in the what's called the Traffic Impact Development Tax Fund, and that has about 1.5 FTE in it. And then in the Insurance Agency Fund, that probably has about 2.4 FTE in it. So these are funds that have relatively small FTE, and so their current budgetary appropriations cannot absorb these cash outs of payroll taxes of personal time off. And so this is an amendment that I would request that be considered for adoption of the supplemental budget. With that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for introductory comments. And I'll stop my share of my screen. So as we go through the process, what we've done in the past is the chair will go page by page on what's called the supplemental budget transmittal memo, which outlines all of the individual transactions that are requested. And if anybody has any questions on that process or any particular request, I will be able to answer them. And then I did also want to give the floor to Councillor Sansucci to see if he had any comments or suggestions on the response to the supplemental budget process that I gave to his questions. They were great questions that come up as to how the supplemental budget process kind of goes through the city's processes to come to the budget committee for review. So I just wanted to open the floor to Councillor Sansucci.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for answering the question. In part, it was for educational purposes for those who haven't been through a supplemental budget process before. But I think, as usually happens, the answer to one question leads to other questions. But those aren't questions that are really necessary to resolve tonight. So I'll bring my secondary questions back at a future time, maybe chat with you, maybe chat with members of the council, and we'll talk about it further. I think it's just, it's interesting to me to see the dynamic of requests for expenditures and timing and the budget and all of that. So I'm still kind of noodling on what issues there may be for me personally, but they're nowhere near solid enough to mention tonight.
And Councillor Sansucci, I do appreciate the questions, because it is a process it's a little bit, it's kind of art and science together, because all of the requests have to come through me for approval. All the way at the beginning of the expenditure side, when something goes wrong, I'll take the central plant for an example. We had some issues of a chiller that we needed to replace the drivers on it. It's very expensive, and our appropriation that we have for central plant maintenance couldn't afford it. So I said, yes, we need to go ahead and get the chiller replaced, repaired, and the supplemental budget will put the money funding in there for the appropriation, even though technically they have spent it before it is coming to you for approval. So there are those types of activities that I, as the finance director, have to kind of make a judgment call as to, yes, go ahead and process to get activities done. So the question I think that I would have if I were the city council is could there be a better process of letting the council know of those things ahead of time versus coming up with the supplemental budget? And so those are some of the things that we might have a discussion out in the future.
And the word that pops into my head when you talk about it that way is threshold. So we'll have a chat about that sometime.
Okay. With that, Mr. Chair, I could bring up the supplemental budget and share the screen, or if you'd like, we can keep on the the video screen and be able to see everybody. And you can just go through asking if there's any comments on page 1 of the transmittal memo.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just go through. As we flip through, yeah, if you have questions on the specific request number, just again throw your name in the chat and we'll recognize you. But page 1, which yeah isn't much. Page 2, does anyone have any questions? Page 3. And actually, if instead of just typing your name, just yell out my name because I may not see it. Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9.
And Mr. Chair, starting on page 9. Page 9 is just a kind of a recast of the previous pages in those requests that are actually using the contingency counts of various funds. So they're just a repeat of what we've already talked about in the first 8 pages. But if you like, we can still go through them because there could be something that one of the members might have a question on.
And we'll go through them. There's a couple more pages. Page 10, 11, 12, or 13. I think that's it. That concludes it. Yeah. Let's see. Chair calls for a motion. So I call for a motion on the supplemental budget S21-2 as submitted. Do I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you,
Mr.
Chair. It's been moved by Councillor Sansucci and seconded by Member Gallo to approve the supplemental budget S21-2 as submitted. Is there any oh wait. So yeah. Mr. Oakley, do we recognize discussion now, or do we do these 1, 2, and oh, I see. There's discussion later. So okay, let's see. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, you can recognize that there is the one known set of amendments to the supplemental budget known as packet number 1 as submitted by the finance director. So you'd like to have a motion to move and second it to approve amendment packet number 1.
Okay, I see that. So recognize there's one known set of amendments to supplemental budget S21-2. I will entertain a motion to approve the amendments and amendment package 1 as submitted by the finance director.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councillor Fagan and seconded by Member Gallo to approve the amendment package 1 as submitted by the finance director to supplemental budget S21-2. Now we'll open the floor for discussion. Is there any discussion on the supplemental budget?
And this is specifically on the amendment.
Amendment, sorry.
Or a vote on the amendment.
Yeah, amendment package 1. Thank you, Mr. Clear. Seeing none, call for a vote on amendment package 1. Susan, would you mind calling the roll, please?
Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansucci.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan.
Yes.
Member Burton.
Yes.
Member Duggar.
Yes.
Member Galendez.
Yes.
Member Hoang.
Yes.
Member Kamath.
Yes.
Member Maldonado.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes.
Thank you, Susan. The motion is carried. Are there any other discussion or amendments? Seeing none, we call for a vote on the main motion as amended by amended package 1 and the supplemental budget and that the supplemental budget S21 be S21-2 be forwarded to the City Council for a public hearing to discuss and approve the supplemental budget as amended. Susan?
Councillor Fagan?
Yes.
Councillor Hassan?
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell?
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi?
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan?
Yes.
Member Burton?
Yes.
Member Duggar?
Yes.
Member Galindez?
Yes.
Member Hoang?
Yes.
Member Kameth?
Yes.
Member Maldonado?
Yes.
Mayor Beatty?
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. The motion is carried. At this point, I will suspend the Budget Committee meeting and turn the meeting over to Mayor Beatty to conduct a special council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Duggar, and thank you for your diligence to being the chair. When you're the chair, it's hard to participate and run the meeting at the same time. So I've learned this year. So thank you for your work on that. I appreciate it. I'm going to convene the City Council for a meeting. Do we need to call another roll?
Yes, for the record, Mayor, that'd be great.
All right, for the record, and all three people watching, well, can we call? Is it Susan calling or the city recorder calling?
Yes.
All right, Susan, for the 15th time tonight, please make sure the entire City Council is present for this vote.
Okay, Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Here.
Councillor Mitchell.
Here.
Councillor Sansusi.
Here.
Councillor Tivnan.
Here.
Mayor Beatty.
Still here. Thank you. Okay, so if there are members of the community watching, which this normally happens with it not being recorded and 0 people in the audience, what is about to happen is we're going to vote on the supplemental budget that we just went through. So if you're watching and you think we're approving the budget tonight, we're going to set a meeting forward for a future date so you can absorb what the City Council has said and come back with future comments for us to improve in June. So just for a reminder, tonight is the vote of the supplemental package that we just went through. So I'm going to open a public hearing on supplemental budget S-21-2. Is there anyone from the community here to address the City Council tonight on the supplemental budget?
If so, you can please raise your hand. Mayor Beatty, I see no attendees who are raising their hand.
Okay, so on that, I will entertain a motion on supplemental budget S-21-2 as amended by the Budget Committee.
Madam Mayor, fellow councilors, I entertain a motion to approve supplemental budget S-21-2 as amended by the Budget Committee.
It's been moved by the Council President. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Councillor Hassan. Is there any discussion? I just want to say for everyone that's participating tonight for the first time, what I've enjoyed the most is one, community is coming in and out and watching because I'm getting text messages and seeing emails coming in for us. Two, when we do this in person, we don't have technology. So we have to flip our name card sideways when you want to talk, which is archaic. In 2020, we're still doing it. And it was hard for the chair to figure out who was going in what order. So I think in the future, we should think about doing these meetings over a technology platform like this, one, the ease of the meetings. And Mr. Gallo, that was the hardest part of him running the budget, was trying to figure out who was talking in what order. And so, John, I think you had it a little bit easy tonight, but we'll let it go. Okay, so we are going to entertain a vote on the supplemental budget only by the City Council. So will Susan please call the roll?
Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes, and I'm going to give the meeting back to Mr. Duggar. Thank you.
Madam Mayor?
Yeah.
We've got to set the date.
Madam Mayor.
Well, I guess that whole thing. Go ahead, Council President.
Madam Mayor and fellow councilors, I'd like to entertain a motion to set a public hearing date of June 15th, 2021 to adopt proposed fiscal year 2021 through 2022 budget as amended by the Budget Committee.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and it's been seconded. Any discussion on moving it forward to June 15th? See none, can we please call the roll?
Councillor Fagan.
Yes.
Councillor Hassan.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell.
Yes.
Councillor Sansusi.
Yes.
Councillor Tivnan.
Yes.
Mayor Beatty.
Yes. Okay, so now, Mr. Duggar, it's your time to have the gavel back.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there any other business before the Budget Committee? Seeing none, you are adjourned now. Thank you so much for this evening. Go eat dinner.
Thank you, Chair Duggar.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Nicely done.
Thank you, Finance Department.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thanks, Gallo.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.